Hello, everybody. Welcome back to our latest live stream. Hope everybody's having a good evening so far. We have a lot to talk about for tomorrow. Tomorrow is going to be obviously another potential severe weather outbreak. There is a lot to talk about for tomorrow because there is a lot more uncertainty than what we had this past Friday with the tornado outbreak that we just had literally a few days ago. Now, these are pretty close to being identical setups, but they are not the same thing. And I'm going to show you why in just a few moments, but it's not the same. We're actually looking potentially at a slightly less likelihood of seeing a severe weather outbreak that's full-blown widespread. We're looking at a bit more of a scattered slash isolated threat of severe weather. So I'm going to kind of give you a breakdown of what we're looking at for tomorrow. There will be multiple rounds of severe storms. There won't just be one or two. There actually could be upwards of 3 rounds of storms tomorrow. So there's a lot to talk about. So I'll give you the latest breakdown on all the new data as well from the HRR model on the 000 run. It literally just came out a few moments ago, so we'll kind of break that down in depth for you as well. Before we get too far into it, just a friendly reminder to hit the like button down below and subscribe if you're new here. And also, if you have any questions, I will try to answer as many as possible, but obviously there's gonna be a ton of them. So, but I'll get to those a little bit later after I kind of get done with my spiel, which will be about 20 minutes. So let's kind of go over what's happening though across the United States right now. That'll lead into that severe weather threat for tomorrow, beginning with the Rocky Mountains. Again, we talked about this on today's forecast, but that's where that low pressure system is currently located. This will start to kind of move off to the north and northeast over the next 24 hours towards areas back over in Iowa, as well as into Minnesota, and that's what's going to start to kind of spin up that potential for severe weather. The other thing with this low pressure system, by tomorrow, it'll be centered over here in Iowa and Minnesota. We're going to see a dry line extending all the way down into Texas. This will actually be allowing to basically send up a bunch of moisture out of the Gulf of Mexico into the Midwest, and all that moisture is going to create the threat for severe weather. One key thing with tomorrow is where the warm front is, because the warm front's going to be up here somewhere, but however far north it goes tomorrow is basically going to determine our threat for severe weather. In addition to this is going to be a negatively tilted trough, so that pull of moisture out of the Gulf of Mexico is much easier in this sort of environment. Now, in terms of what's going to happen over the next 24 hours, we're actually going to see some snow back up in the northern plains and as well as through the Rocky Mountains over the next 24 hours. Believe it or not, there are blizzard warnings in effect for those in South and North Dakota. We are now in April, and yes, I know, blizzard warnings up there. It is not like impossible to see that in April, but obviously we are now in April, so things are starting to get much warmer, but those areas are going to be dealing with a blizzard over the next 24 hours. Big reason why is because this low pressure system will be down to 985 millibars. You can see these isobars, those very small black lines there. When they're much closer together, that's representing much higher wind speed, so we're going to see a lot of blowing snow and drifting over there. So just kind of a little, you know, I guess you learned something if you didn't know about that already. But yeah, that's what we're looking at over there anyways in terms of the blizzard-like conditions. On the other hand, we are watching obviously for the threat of severe weather. Things will start to ramp up tomorrow afternoon and evening across the Midwest, and as well as eventually into the lower mid-Mississippi Valley. That is where severe weather will likely fire up later in the evening and into the overnight hours. So we'll be watching for 2 different sets of timing across the United States. Again, I'll give you detailed breakdowns on all of that a little bit later in this forecast. Once we go into the overnight hours into tomorrow or into Wednesday morning, that is when that line of storms will move off to the east, and we'll eventually be talking about some showers and storms back through the Ohio Valley and as well as back through the southeast as we go into Wednesday. There is a threat for severe weather now, and it's a pretty large slight risk for Wednesday. More details on that as well later in this forecast, but that's basically from Michigan all the way back through the really southern plains. It's a very large area that we're watching Wednesday night, and eventually going to Thursday, we'll still be watching for a little bit of severe weather, but not nearly as significant as what we're talking about, at least for tomorrow, and as well as potentially going into Wednesday. So yeah, again, Wednesday has a huge slight risk that actually got issued earlier today. Believe it or not, there was a rare day 3 upgrade on the risk of severe weather. I'll talk about more on that later in this forecast, but usually on the day 3 outlooks, the Storm Prediction Center only issues 1 outlook. They actually issued 2 today. They basically made a much larger slight risk of severe weather, mainly due to the fact more confidence is growing in severe weather now on Wednesday, and as well as obviously on Tuesday. All right, let's talk about the overall severe weather potential for tomorrow. Nothing really changed again from today's forecast in terms of the outlook. Now, obviously, things have changed in terms of the ingredients, the storm timing, all that sort of stuff has changed a little bit, so I'll talk about more on that here in a moment. But right now, there are 2 moderate risks of severe weather. one of which is in the Midwest. That is for Iowa, Illinois, and as well southwest Wisconsin and northeast Missouri. And then there's also another moderate risk of severe weather that goes through southern Missouri and then back into Arkansas. And believe it or not, southeast Oklahoma, about 2 counties are basically in the cusp or really kind of barely in that moderate risk for severe weather tomorrow. Now, you want to still be weather aware tomorrow if you're anywhere in the enhanced risk of severe weather or the slight risk. We very well could see severe weather there, even though it's a little bit of a lower chance. We still very well could see some significant severe weather outside of those moderate risks of severe weather. Now, in terms of the tornado threat, it is much more significant in 2 specific areas. One, which I think is the most significant for tomorrow, will be across Iowa as well as into Illinois. This is a region that I have a lot more concern about tomorrow for a tornado risk. Further to the south, there's also a 15% area within a 25-mile radius of a tornado, which we could see an EF2 plus tornado in either of these hatched areas. That again includes areas in the Midwest and as well as back from Missouri into northeast Texas. But I have a lot more concern up here in comparison to the areas basically in the lower Mississippi Valley. I'll explain more of why in a moment. But you want to make sure you have a tornado action plan in place tonight and not tomorrow. If you are in a mobile home, have a shelter in mind for tomorrow in case you are under any damaging wind warnings of severe thunderstorm warnings, and as well as any tornado warnings. Again, that will extend anywhere from the Midwest back through areas even into northeast Texas. It's a very large area that we're still watching tomorrow. The size of this event is very similar to what we saw on Friday, but again, I don't think these will be identical because the overall severe weather is not going to be as widespread. That's the big thing with this. We're not going to be watching widespread severe storms in multiple rounds. We'll be still watching for multiple rounds of severe weather, but 2 of them are likely going to be more isolated, and then the third one might be a bit more numerous to widespread. So there are some differences. Again, I'll break those down a little bit later in this forecast. In terms of the hail potential, we are actually going to be watching for some large to very large hail. That main threat right now is across southeast Iowa, back into areas like western Illinois, and as well as into northern sections of Missouri. That is where we have the highest chance for large to very large hail. Upwards of apple-sized hail is not out of the question with an isolated supercell that does develop. And you might be wondering, why is the hail risk so much higher up here? Well, we actually have a low pressure system that's going to be back up here to the north. The temperatures aloft are going to be much cooler the further north you go. And you might already know there's going to be a big winter storm up here in the northern plains and a blizzard. This is a big reason why it's going to be so much colder aloft, is because we'll have that availability to see some larger hailstones across those 4 states. So again, make sure that you are staying weather aware tomorrow, have multiple ways to receive alerts, and take the proper precautions now and not later. All right, in terms of the damaging wind potential, it's actually a little bit lower than what it was about couple days ago, back on Friday. It's actually lower than what that was. We don't have a hatched area for damaging winds, but we are still going to be watching for some numerous damaging winds across this entire red area that extends from Wisconsin all the way back down through areas in Oklahoma. This is a region that will be watching for some significant damaging winds still, even though we're not looking at 70, 80, 90 mile per hour damaging winds. We very well could at least see some numerous 60 mile per hour damaging winds with maybe some more isolated 70 to 75 mile per hour damaging winds out of this event tomorrow, because that third round of storms that we're watching will be that line of storms that develops along the dry line. That is what's going to be a bit more concerning for that damaging wind potential, and any isolated discrete cells as well could very well produce that damaging wind potential as well. How's everybody doing? Welcome. All right, let's go through the jet stream. And again, this is a big part of the severe weather tomorrow is going to be that jet stream, because this is what helps to position this entire event. So once we go into tomorrow, those upper level winds, actually, wait one second. Let me go to a closer run here, because I think that one's a little bit dated. All right, here's the more recent run on the jet stream. The jet stream is actually quite important for tomorrow's severe weather event, mainly because we need strong upper level winds to have some more of these intense updrafts with these thunderstorms. And back over in the Midwest, we're going to have a fairly strong upper level winds back through areas in western Illinois, eastern Iowa. Again, that's where we're going to see that threat for at least somewhat of a mini tornado outbreak, if not potentially a severe weather outbreak across this area. Strong upper level winds will help to basically guide some more intense updrafts, which will also lead to more large hail potential with any of the supercells that develop over there. Once we go into Wednesday, that is when that jet stream starts to obviously move a bit further off to the east, and that's when our next chance for severe weather will exist on Wednesday. Very strong upper level winds still. That southwesterly flow low is going to help again to really intensify these supercells as we go into not just Tuesday, but also into Wednesday. So a couple of concerning days ahead. Again, we have 2 threats of severe weather. I only talked about one of them on today's forecast because there's just so much to talk about. I only could fit so much into 10 minutes of a forecast, so that's why I'm doing a live stream and all this, because again, we have a winter storm, we have extreme fire danger, we have an entire severe weather outbreak event potentially tomorrow, and we have more severe weather on Wednesday, and maybe another threat of severe weather on Thursday. It's like literally never ending. There are so many things going on. It's actually crazy. All right, in terms of the low-level jet, this is also something we're watching for very closely tomorrow. This is basically what gives us an idea of rotating supercells, and the stronger the low-level jet is, the better likelihood of rotating supercells, and we're really watching the closest area for this during the afternoon. We'll be back through the Midwest. You'll notice over here all these red colors. That's representing around 50 to 60 knots for a low-level jet that's being currently forecasted by the HRR model, and this is a concerning area. We very well could see a few strong tornadoes across that region, especially west of Chicago. I would say Chicago is not really in the direct line of that threat, but west of Chicago, back through eastern Iowa, western Illinois, that's a bit more of a concerning area. The stronger this low-level jet is, the easier for these storms to rotate, basically. So this is an area that we'll have to watch for very closely. And not just that, the low-level jet will also be fairly strong across areas back through Missouri and as well as Arkansas. But the thing is, storms will not develop most likely until closer to the overnight hours. So once that develops, that's when we could start to see that tornado threat increasing a little bit down that direction. All right, let's talk about more specific details now. We're going to begin with the Midwest in terms of the tornado potential tomorrow. This is, again, a hatched region. That means there is a threat for EF2 plus tornadoes. Really, that chance is not that high. It's still kind of in the medium sector, I would say, in terms of a strong tornado threat. But the overall tornado threat in this area is still kind of on the medium to high end for like at least an EF1, EF0 type tornado. There's at least a high chance of at least seeing 1 or 2 of those across this region. And the main reason why is because all the ingredients are coming together for a very, very favorable environment for tornadoes. This is a very concerning area for tomorrow. I cannot stress that enough. If you're in this area, again, make sure you have multiple ways to receive alerts tomorrow. We very well could see some very significant severe weather across that region. In addition to that, there's obviously that threat outside of there that you still want to make sure you have multiple ways to receive alerts. But this region here has all the ingredients basically coming together into one spot here in eastern Iowa and western Illinois. So make sure, again, if you're in this area, have your tornado action plan in place tonight. If you're in a mobile home, make sure that you have a shelter that you can go to if you're under any warnings. And if you're in an apartment building on the 2nd, 3rd, 4th floor, wherever you are, anywhere above the 1st floor, make sure you ask the neighbor on the 1st floor if you can shelter with them if there's any tornado warnings tomorrow, because that's an area that has a very high potential, really high ceiling, I should say, for tornado threat there. It's actually potentially going to be slightly higher than what we saw on Friday in that sort of regard. Again, I'll show you more details on that here in just a moment. Another big characteristic with this, I mentioned this at the very beginning of this live stream, is where this warm front goes. Because right now, this is going into tomorrow morning, by the way. Notice in Iowa, believe it or not, parts of Iowa will be in the 30s and low 40s when we wake up. Even in southern Iowa, it's only gonna be in the upper 40s. That's really cold, you'd think, for severe weather. Well, the thing is, all that moisture and as well as that warm air will surge up to the north as we go into Tuesday afternoon. And look at this. Temperatures near 90 degrees as we go into Tuesday afternoon. I know, a crazy contrast of temperatures, but once all that humid as well as that warm air lifts from the south, very strong southerly winds tomorrow with that negatively tilted trough back out here, that's going to create a lot more humidity as well as a lot more heat across this area, mainly due to the fact, again, very strong southerly winds. Here's your warm front going closer to about 3 to 4 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. That basically means severe weather, very unlikely to the north of here at that given time. Once we get closer to around 4, 5, 6 o'clock, the warm air does lift slightly further up to the north into southern Wisconsin, but where this warm front goes is such a crucial point. There is still so much uncertainty with this event. I'm not even going to lie to you. There is still a lot of uncertainty with what happens with this event in terms of all the severe weather. One of the big reasons why is because how far north this warm front goes. Will that cold front be enough of an initiator initially going into Tuesday afternoon and evening? That's a lot. There's still so many question marks with this system, but we can basically give you the best guess that the most significant severe weather right now will be in here. And I have more details, again, to back that up in here in a second, but I'm just showing you the temperatures for now because this is actually kind of crazy contrast. Again, cold front back out here to the west, and that is when that line of storms will develop going into late Tuesday evening. Dew points as well is another big thing. Here are the very strong southerly winds by Tuesday afternoon around the same time. Dew points into the mid 60s by then. And again, this is where we very well could see some very significant severe weather across northeast Missouri, western Illinois, and as well as southeast Iowa. That is a very concerning area for tomorrow. especially with all the ingredients that we have coming together. A lot of buoyancy, very high humidity. It's just going to be really a dangerous area tomorrow if any storms are able to develop, even though there will be somewhat of a cap in this region as well. Now, in terms of the significant tornado parameter, this is the latest from the HR model run. I've actually not even looked at this yet because it just came through. I don't know if there's any major changes, but we're going to check it out. So this is going into Tuesday afternoon. What the tornado parameter essentially is a 0 to 10 scale. 0 is like a 0% chance of a tornado. 10 meaning there's a very high chance of a tornado at that given spot if there's an actual cell there. Basically what we're looking at though here is the tornado probabilities on the tornado parameter value. So going into Tuesday afternoon and evening, if any storms are able to form across this area, which again, this is the most concerning area tomorrow afternoon, in my opinion, for severe weather. Even though we could see severe weather outside of this region, which we likely will, this is still a very concerning area for that tornado potential. The HRR model has been estimating values for a pretty long time now, over the last like 24 hours, right around 5 to 6 in the peak areas. Right now, where those supercells develop is right around 2 to 4. There are some values back up here to the north near 9, but again, that is not where the storms will be developing. So we don't have too much concern there, but if any storms do develop across this region here, we'd be talking about values 2, 4, 5. That is a medium threat for tornadoes across this region, and those tornado parameter values do still remain high, even through the overnight hours, around 2, 3, 4 all across this area. That is where that linear line of storms will develop tomorrow evening. That is where we could see also some significant severe weather with damaging winds, large hail, and obviously the embedded tornado threat in that linear line of storms being possible. This could end up turning into a squall line when this is all said and done, going into overnight Tuesday and as well as into Wednesday. So something to watch out for. Tornado risk for those over in Illinois, by the way, will likely remain low. So if you're back over in Chicago, I meant to say Chicago, I think I said Illinois. If you're back over in Chicago, the threat remains low over there. Tornado risk actually does appear to be possible as well going into Wednesday. There is now a huge slight risk of severe weather on Wednesday. I'll talk about more on that here in a little bit. And we're going to talk about the timing up next. Just give me 1 second. I'm talking a lot, and I need some water. Friendly reminder, by the way, if you're just tuning in, make sure to hit the like button down below and subscribe if you've not already. All right, let's talk about the timing. We have a lot of stuff to talk about now from the timing and all the other stuff. So we're going to begin with the timing. This is a broad timing scale. I'm going to show you every state by, like, we're literally going to show you state by state here in a second, but I'm going to show you the general timing for tomorrow. This is the most recent HRR model run. This is a pretty accurate model when it comes to storms. Now, it's not obviously perfect, and it's not going to be entirely exact to where the storms develop, but it gives us a good idea of what will happen tomorrow across the Midwest. So going overnight tonight, there will be some convection. I would not rule out an isolated storm that actually is strong overnight tonight across central or southern Illinois. This threat remains low, but there might be some small hail or gusty winds. This is not a tornado outbreak or anything like that with this sort of stuff, but this will be something to watch out for maybe some isolated strong storm activity overnight. Once we go to tomorrow morning, there will be a potential for some more convection. This will not be severe, but this actually might help a little bit to limit, or basically if there's any convection tomorrow morning, it could create a little bit of sinking air, which may limit the severe weather potential just ever so slightly across southern Wisconsin and maybe the very northern part of Illinois. Even though I don't think severe weather will be too significant in this area, there is still a threat for that up that direction. Once we get closer to lunchtime, that storm may intensify a little bit. So this, if there is any storms up this direction, there is a possibility they do intensify depending on how fast that warm front lifts up to the north and how fast all that humidity also lifts up to the north. That's a huge question still going into tomorrow just after lunchtime. Once we get closer to about 2 to 3 o'clock, notice back over here near Iowa and as well as Minnesota. I always say Minnesota. Missouri as well as Illinois. This is an area that has a lot of concern for some isolated to scattered discrete supercells during tomorrow afternoon. Now, this is right around 3 to 4 o'clock, so this is when those storms could very well start to bubble up and really explode quickly. So you're going to want to make sure you're keeping a very close eye to the sky if you're outdoors, have multiple ways to receive alerts, because ever-changing weather conditions are expected very rapidly tomorrow across this region if these storms are able to develop to the magnitude that they're currently forecasted to get to. Eventually going closer to about 5 to 6 o'clock, storms are still exploding here in western Illinois, and eventually going closer to about 7-ish, those storms will continue to move off to the east. Now, another question, as I mentioned before, is how far north this warm front goes. The HRR model is basically saying here that warm front isn't far enough to the north for these storms to live. So that's kind of what we're seeing here with all this yellow now. That's just moderate rain with weak storms. This is entirely a possibility where we see a few discrete cells for a few hours here across western Illinois. back through southeast Iowa and northeast Missouri, but there's also a possibility that those storms live a bit longer if all that heat and humidity lifts further up to the north. Once we go into the evening hours, we'll be watching for maybe a second round of storms to develop back near Des Moines in northeast Iowa. This is an area that we could actually see a tornado risk, as well as the threat for maybe some large hail. So keep this in the back of your head. There is a small chance there for maybe a couple of tornadoes and maybe even some large hail and damaging wind gusts if those storms are able to develop as well. That's basically our intermittent round 2. I'm really calling it round 1.5. because it's just such a small round of storms. It's a very small area, because our round technically 2, I'll call it 3. It's kind of confusing. I'm basically saying a bunch of numbers. But round 1 is those discrete cells in the afternoon. Round 2 might be a couple of storms back near Iowa going into closer to the evening hours. Round 3 is that linear line of storms that could develop going closer to midnight on Wednesday and into the overnight hours. This is where we could see the threat for maybe some damaging wind gusts, large hail, and as well as a threat for a few tornadoes embedded in this line. You can see that developing here around 1 o'clock overnight. That line of storms could very well pose all modes of severe weather, but you can see here the HRR model does not keep it alive very long. So there's still a lot of uncertainty with how long that line of storms even lasts. So again, I've been mentioning this a lot. There's a lot of uncertainty with this event. We're going to have a lot more details as this gets closer. It's going to be one of those events where basically all of these storms that develop, when they actually develop, we'll basically know what's happening when everything happens. It's just one of those kind of events where there's still a lot of uncertainty in regards to how long that line of storms lasts, and as well as when those discrete cells and how many discrete cells develop tomorrow afternoon. So I want to give you a friendly reminder to make sure you have multiple ways to receive alerts, have a tornado action plan in place, and just prepare for severe weather as if it's going to happen tomorrow in multiple rounds, because that's what we're at least forecasting right now. And look at this, while we go into late Wednesday morning and even into the afternoon hours, there will be a threat for some storms to develop back over here in Minnesota. I keep saying Minnesota, Michigan, and as well as Indiana. This is Michigan and Indiana. That is where some storms will develop. This is where we could also see the threat for some damaging winds, large hail, and a tornado risk. I will talk about more on this here in just a moment, but this is another threat we're watching for very closely as we go into Wednesday. All right. I'm running out of breath so quickly. All right, let's talk about Missouri. This is an area that we have a lot of concern about as well for Missouri, especially the eastern half of the state. This is where we could see some significant severe weather tomorrow. So take a closer look back up into the northeast side of the state. I mentioned this before. There could be a couple of discrete cells that develop tomorrow afternoon. This is 4 o'clock Central Time. You can notice there back north of Quincy, that is where the most significant storms will likely develop. Those are the ones that would likely be discrete, producing all modes of severe weather, including damaging winds, large hail, and that tornado threat around 4 o'clock. Once we get closer to 5 to 6 o'clock, things clear out for the most part. There may be a second round of storms as well. That could potentially be the threat for some damaging winds if it's able to materialize. I cannot say that word. I try to say materialize. That word I've had. Funny enough, I said that in a video one time and I couldn't say that word, but that's the word. They might actually develop, though, in the southern portions of Missouri during the late evening hours, and eventually going into the overnight hours. That is when the third round of storms develops. That is your linear line of storms. This could very well become a squall line. We could see some significant damaging wind potential with this, and along with the threat for some embedded tornadoes if it's intense enough as it goes through areas like Columbia and as well as St. Louis, and then by the morning hours that moves off to the east. So that's what we're looking at in terms of the line of storms. For those in Iowa, this is an interesting state because we're going to be watching for multiple rounds of storms. The first one, again, will be during the afternoon hours at the very far right of your screen. Let me see. Yeah, guys can see it. So back again, very far right of your screen, that is where a couple of supercells will likely develop. Give or take the location. They could be further off here to the west. They could be up near Davenport. They could be over near Iowa City. Again, give or take the location. This is just an estimate on the future radar. By 5 to 6 o'clock, we're going to be watching for another area of storms, most likely developing near Mason City, back through Des Moines, probably closer to the late evening, around sunset or so. That is when some supercells could fire off. These could produce all modes of severe weather as well, including a tornado risk for Marshalltown, back through Waterloo, and Decorah. Those areas be on alert for the potential for some rapidly changing weather conditions closer to around 7 to 8 o'clock tomorrow. Give or take an hour or two on that timeline. Eventually going closer to 9 to 10 o'clock, those storms will continue across Waterloo and Decorah, and eventually going closer to about 1 to 2 a.m. That is when that linear line of storms develops. Will it be this weak or strong? It's still to be determined. It very well could be stronger than what it's showing here on the HRR model back near Cedar Rapids. All the ingredients, again, are in place. It's just a matter of how far north this warm front is, the dew points, and all that sort of stuff. But back near Cedar Rapids, Iowa City, just be prepared for a third round of storms around 2, 3 a.m. or so. That is when some damaging wind potential will exist, with, again, a low-end tornado threat with that line of storms as well. For those back through the Midwest, this is an area that's going to be a little bit tricky. So Give me one second. I need to drink more water. But yeah, again, this is going to be an area that's a bit more tricky because there's going to be multiple rounds of storms. How long that line of storms lasts going into the overnight hours is a bit of a question mark. I'll give you, again, more details on that here in a second. All right, so let's talk about tomorrow morning first, and then we'll go back through the other rounds of storms. So basically in the Midwest, we're actually, believe it or not, watching basically 4 rounds of storms. The first one will be across areas in Illinois and Indiana during the morning hours tomorrow. This is not likely to be severe. I wouldn't rule out some very marginal severe storms like quarter-sized hail, maybe damaging winds up to 60 miles per hour. But for the most part, if any storms do develop into the early tomorrow morning, they will likely just be strong. They will also have some lightning out there, so make sure if you are going outdoors, you know, obviously, if there's any thunder, go indoors. That's what you got to do if there's any thunder or lightning out here, because there probably will be if there's any storms tomorrow morning across areas like Champaign and back through Indianapolis. Eventually going into the late morning and into the afternoon hours, again, not a whole lot ongoing until probably maybe around 3-4 o'clock. That is when those storms develop back over here. I've mentioned it several times, but this is the more concerning area for some discrete supercell action going into the afternoon and evening hours. So those storms develop, again, as you can notice here, back near Rockford. Again, it depends on how far north that warm front goes. If it doesn't go far enough north, these storms will weaken as the HR model shows. But if it does go further to the north, some significant severe weather may continue through Rockford, back through Arlington Heights, and maybe even Chicago. Once we go closer to the late evening hours, so right around 10, 11, 12 o'clock. Again, we may have a little bit of storm activity back near Carbondale and St. Louis. That's a bit of a question mark as well, but if that does end up occurring, the threat for maybe a little bit of large hail is possible, so maybe some 60-mile-per-hour damaging winds, but the tornado risk would likely be very low out of that anyways. Overnight, we'll be watching for a couple of different areas of storms. Again, there will be a little complex here back through Indiana. That's what we just mentioned, but overnight, by around 4 to 5 a.m., that is when a linear line of storms will be possible. Again, the HRR model has been taking a very, very conservative approach to this line of storms. But again, it could be much stronger than this. I know it shows a lot of yellow, some blue, and stuff like that. That usually just indicates light rain or maybe some moderate rain with maybe an isolated storm in there. But this could be much stronger than what it looks like. We very well could be talking about some significant damaging winds and maybe a couple of tornadoes embedded in a linear line of storms. But again, that still remains quite uncertain to this point. Once we get closer to the morning hours on Wednesday, that is when storms start to fire up again. And we'll be watching for another threat of severe weather once we go into Wednesday. Again, I'll talk about more on that in a few moments. All right, let's go over to, I'm not going to talk about the storm relative helicity right now. We just talked about the timing. All right, let's go a bit further down to the south. We're going to talk about Missouri and as well as Arkansas and southeast Oklahoma and northeast Texas. Basically anywhere that we've not already talked about. So for the most part, south of Missouri. That's where we're now talking about. Then we'll go back over to the day 3 outlook, and then I'll answer your questions. So the tornado risk further down here to the south is still quite significant. Again, this is your 15% probability within a 25-mile radius of a tornado, and that is still pretty much a medium threat of a tornado risk here. So we're still watching for maybe a tornado or 2 across this entire region, maybe even more than that. We very well could see a few tornadoes, which again, those could also be strong. There's an entire hatched area from St. Louis back through northeast Texas. This is where we have a 10% probability within a 25-mile radius of a strong tornado. That is EF2 plus potential. So if you're anywhere from St. Louis back through here, make sure you definitely have your safety plan in place tonight, your tornado action plan. And again, make sure you have multiple ways to receive alerts as we go into tomorrow, because there very well could be some very significant severe weather. All right, in terms of the tornado parameter down this direction, for those that might be just tuning in and have no clue what the tornado parameter is, this is a basically a computer model that we look at from a scale of 0 to 10. So this is what we're looking at. So a scale of 0 to 10, 0 meaning that there's basically no tornado threat, and then 10 meaning that there's a pretty much a very high tornado risk with storms that develop. So this is what we're going to be looking at going into late Tuesday night to Wednesday morning. So that tornado parameter values do increase back near where that line of storms will develop. And you can actually notice back over here, values upwards of 5, 6 are possible back where that line of storms might develop going into late Tuesday night. Now, I still think the HRR model is kind of pushing it with these values. I know they're pretty high, by the way. These are not like, you know, low values by any means. The Friday event that we had a few days ago, that event, the values were like 3, 4, 5. There was a few areas with 6. There was no widespread areas of 6 to 7. Though the environment is favorable for tornadoes tomorrow, the thing is, will these storms actually be capable of it? How many storms will there actually be? That's kind of the big question mark still. But once we go into the overnight hours Tuesday into Wednesday, that is when storms will continue to move off to the east. Tornado risk will decrease quite substantially overnight. Though it's not 0, it is going to be lower than what it will be during the late evening hours across these areas. So you can notice down here near Arkansas, those parameter values are down to 1, 2, maybe 3. So the values are much lower going into late Tuesday night to Wednesday morning. And eventually going into Wednesday, we still have a tornado risk all the way back through Ohio. Again, I'll talk about that day 3 Wednesday outlook in a moment. All right, talking about Arkansas now in terms of timing. Let's go ahead and kind of break this down a little bit. So there might be some storms during the afternoon. Again, that still kind of remains uncertain, but if any storms are able to develop, the main concern would be damaging winds and the threat for some large hail. We could see a couple of tornadoes, though. That'll be mainly west of Little Rock, probably around 5 to 8 o'clock tomorrow evening, eventually going closer to 9 to 10 o'clock. That line of storms, or at least that cluster, it's not really an organized line, but more of a cluster of storms would push off to the east. This would mainly produce the threat for large hail, damaging winds, and maybe a couple of tornadoes. Overnight, Tuesday night into Wednesday morning, look at this, by the way. This is kind of a bit more of a concern, is if any discrete supercells do end up developing closer to even midnight, 1 in the morning, the tornado parameter values are going to be high enough, and obviously the low-level jet will be strong enough, and the upper-level winds will be very strong to the point where we could very well see some of these rotating supercells. If any of these get discrete, that tornado risk will be increased. So we have to watch this threat very closely. We could see some nocturnal tornadoes tomorrow, which is nocturnal, for those that don't know, is nighttime basically in terms of a tornado threat. So we're watching after dark tornadoes being possible tomorrow night. Eventually going to the overnight hours, storms will roll through areas like Mountain Home, north of Little Rock, and eventually going closer to 5 to 6 a.m. That is when that linear line of storms will approach. It does seem as if that this linear line of storms will be much stronger the further south you go overnight. So you can see down here near Little Rock, much stronger storms. You see a lot more of these pinks and as well as these white colors kind of showing up. That's representing at least a large hail and damaging wind potential, which the large hail threat with lines of storms is typically not that high. It's usually like quarter, $half size, but it's still notable. It at least shows you kind of what we're looking at in terms of severe weather here. There very well could be a couple of embedded tornadoes as well in this line of storms, and eventually going into Wednesday afternoon, that is when that entire area moves off to the east. All right, next up is going to be Kentucky, Tennessee, and a lot of other areas, and then we'll start talking about Wednesday, and then we'll go back to questions on Tuesday. All right, so beginning with Kentucky and Tennessee. Again, there will be a little threat for maybe a few storms going into tomorrow morning in southern Illinois and as well as southern Indiana, but eventually going into the afternoon, that is when we're still going to be dry here across these states. There might be a couple of storms near Paducah going closer to around 10, 12 o'clock. These are likely not going to be very severe if they are. Main concern would be damaging winds most likely. Going into the overnight hours, that is when storms will continue to push into Evansville, Louisville, and eventually moving off to the east and northeast. And we'll be watching for a linear line of storms here as we go into Wednesday. The threat of severe weather, though, across Kentucky and as well as Tennessee is much higher on Wednesday in comparison to Tuesday. So this will be an area to watch for some damaging winds and large hail. And again, that tornado risk will increase on Wednesday. Wednesday seems to be a bit more concerning now than it once was. It was a slight risk this morning. It still is, but the slight risk has grown quite substantially. So I'll show you that more here in just a second. For those in the southern plains, there actually is a threat for severe weather down here, believe it or not. There will be a chance for a few severe storms as we go into late Tuesday. You can actually see here by 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, we may see a few storms develop back over northeast Texas. This would be for the main threat of large hail and maybe some damaging winds. So those would be moving off to the north and east. Eventually going closer to the evening hours, that is when that continues to move off to the east. We very well could see a few cells even develop in southeast Oklahoma or near the Red River Valley there in North Texas and Oklahoma. And if those storms do develop, the main concern will be, again, damaging winds and maybe some large hail. I wouldn't rule out an isolated tornado out of something like that. Once we get closer to the overnight hours, that is when that linear line of storms explodes across northeast Texas. And again, the further south you go, it seems as if this squall line would be much more intense. So we'll be watching for a more significant damaging wind and large hail potential out of this, with again, a couple of tornadoes being possible across that line of storms. And eventually going into Wednesday afternoon, that is when that continues to march out to the east, where storm activity will still be possible in East Texas. There's actually a low-end threat for some flash flooding there because there will be a little low pressure system that ends up developing there later this week. All right, in terms of the severe weather threat going into Wednesday, we'll go back to Tuesday in a second, so if you have any questions, feel free to leave those in the chat. I'll get to them here soon. But for Wednesday, there is now a slight risk of severe weather. That includes this area. Now, the most recent update is actually not on this map, which is quite incredible. It's actually much larger than this. Let me go and pull this up on my other monitor, because I did not realize this did not update. All right, this is a much larger area, so let's go and pull this up on here. So this is our new slight risk of severe weather. There we go. So I'll kind of pull it up here. That is our new slight risk of severe weather, though. So it's much larger than what it was this morning. It actually goes all the way into Louisiana and even East Texas. So this is a region that we'll be watching for some significant severe weather. Damaging winds most likely will be the main concern. We'll have a little bit of large hail and maybe a few tornadoes as well. And that main concern will be probably across Michigan as well as going through Ohio and Indiana. The tornado parameter values as we go into Wednesday will not be as high as they are tomorrow. tomorrow, but they will be around 1, maybe 2, so we could see a couple of tornadoes. They probably wouldn't be long tracked or strong. There's a low chance for maybe an isolated strong tornado, but I'd be more concerned about just some brief and weak tornadoes. That's probably what we'll be looking at going into Wednesday. The threat overall, though, of damaging winds is higher than the tornado threat and as well as the large hail threat, so we'll be watching for that. See the values even going into late Wednesday. They're still around 0.5. That's very, very low on the scale of the tornado parameter. So even through Ohio, the threat of severe weather does remain quite low. In terms of the timing, we'll start to see storms most likely going into Wednesday morning across a large chunk, anywhere from the Ohio Valley back through Texas. This is where we'll probably see some damaging wind potential. Flash flooding will become a pretty big concern here, and as well as maybe a tornado threat. The tornado threat will be a little bit higher back over here near Chicago, just south of there. That is where a few discrete cells may be ongoing during the morning, so be mindful of that. Once we get closer to the afternoon and evening hours, we'll be watching this move off to the east with more storm activity through Kentucky, Tennessee, and as well as Mississippi, and eventually going closer to the late evening. That is when storms will still continue, with mainly damaging winds being a concern. So we'll be watching for that threat as well as we go into late Wednesday. All right, that is the entire forecast. That took 35 minutes. Was it really 35 minutes? There's no way I've been talking for 35 minutes, have I? I've been talking for 35 minutes. I did not even realize that. All right, well, that went by so fast. How's everybody doing? All right, I'm going to get some questions now. I did not realize I went for 35 minutes. That was so long. I apologize for those that just suffered through 35 minutes of me talking. I literally thought this was only going to take like 20 minutes like it usually does, but I do apologize. 35 minutes. Imagine a forecast being that long. We didn't even talk about the fire risk tomorrow. We didn't even talk about the winter storm that's going to be happening tomorrow either. We didn't talk about either one. That's actually crazy. All right, let me get to some of these notifications real quick. I think I missed a few. I'll go on Stream Elements to see them. If you have any questions, leave them in the chat. I'll be prioritizing super chats if there are any, but obviously if there's no super chats, we'll be just answering questions in chat. Populous said, $4.99. Thank you for the $4.99. Severe weather outlook for St. Louis. Yeah, St. Louis is kind of in a weird spot, so let me go back over to there. I have so many tabs open. Holy cow. Actually, I'm going to show you guys this real quick. Look at how many tabs I have open at the top of your screen. Literally, all of these tabs right here. That is crazy. Talk about crazy. All right, let me go to St. Louis. So somebody's asking about the St. Louis potential for tomorrow. I didn't even realize, I'm not going to lie, I did not realize this forecast would be 35 minutes. I thought this would be 20 minutes, and it went way over that. So St. Louis, there'll be a potential for maybe a small area of storms around the morning hours. It's a low chance overall. Discrete cells will likely be to your north tomorrow afternoon. You're kind of in that in-between area. So if we go back over to the Storm Prediction Center outlook for tomorrow, you're kind of in that in-between region for severe weather. So here's St. Louis. You're in that enhanced risk of severe weather, which you should still be mindful. Treat it as if it's a moderate risk of severe weather, because significant severe weather is still possible there. But that is an area that we are still concerned about for some severe weather. And let's go back and find the timing. Here we go. So again, a couple of discrete cells during the afternoon. Those are much more concerning. Eventually going into the evening and overnight hours, that is when another area of storms may impact your location. That would be potentially round 2 of storms. And then that squall line, if it does survive, you could see that going into the early morning hours of Wednesday. But overall, the severe weather threat is not the most concerning I've ever seen for St. Louis, but you should still be weather aware. Again, I would not, by the way, just a friendly reminder, not everybody's going to see severe weather tomorrow. I'll be real with you. Tomorrow is not going to be what Friday was. I think Friday was much worse. This has the potential to be pretty bad as well, but it's not going to be as widespread. Just keep that in mind. I mean, look at tomorrow. A few discrete cells, that's probably what we'll see. We could see more than this, but I think this is kind of what we're going to be looking at tomorrow. There's not going to be as much storm activity tomorrow. We have some good news there. It's not going to be a widespread severe weather event, so do not panic by any means. You just need to make sure that you're prepared for tomorrow, have a plan in place, have multiple ways to receive warnings and alerts. There is still going to be that threat for some significant severe weather, and any storms that do develop will have a really high risk of producing a tornado threat, especially across that region from Cedar Rapids, Davenport, Galesburg, Peoria. Those areas have a higher tornado risk. But again, I would not panic. Just make sure you have ways to receive alerts. The threat for severe weather tomorrow is not as high as you might think. Now, we could go to a high risk. I'm not ruling that out, but I still think it's much lower chance of that happening than what happened on Friday, just due to the parameters that we have, how far north this warm front goes. Now, bearing something that drastically changes going into overnight tonight and tomorrow morning, that is what I'm thinking. So Just keep that in mind. I still think that there is a significant threat for severe weather tomorrow. That's without a doubt. But this is not going to be as widespread as Friday. I can almost assure you that. Obviously, there will still be a lot of storms out there. The overall intensity of those storms, even though there will be numerous to widespread severe storms going overnight probably, those are not going to be nearly as bad as at least what we saw on Friday, at least in my opinion. Now, we could very well see some bad severe weather. I've said that multiple times. The overall general gist of this, there will not be as many discrete cells during the afternoon and evening in comparison to what we just saw on Friday. There was a ton of them from Arkansas all the way back through Illinois and Wisconsin. So just keep that in mind. Thank you, Valentina, for the Storm Chaser member, by the way. Appreciate it. Thank you, Ohio Dung Beetle, for the $5 super chat. Your tornado action plan needs to involve a sustainable chair. I cannot disagree with that. This chair has been so uncomfortable. My back already hurts. Like, I'm telling you, I really need to get a new office chair. Because this one, by the way, for those that are wondering, I literally just broke one the other day. So, the one I bought for $200, I had it for a few months, and it broke, and now I'm without a actual office chair. Is West Central Wisconsin getting snow or rain? That is a good question. Let's actually check that out. So, yeah, this entire thing is going to be very interesting, because there's two sides to this entire basically system, one of which is the winter storm and blizzard that'll be happening back up in the northern plains and a little bit of the Midwest, and then we'll also be watching for the severe weather outbreak potential tomorrow and as well as Wednesday. For western central Wisconsin, you have a better chance of rain and snow. I'm not concerned about severe weather there. The warm front is just not going to lift far up to the north. Now, I don't know where you are in west central Wisconsin. If you're up here, then you're definitely not looking at it. If you're further down here to the south, there's a very, very low chance that you see any severe weather there. I'm guessing that's probably the general area that you're in, but I have no clue. But that's basically what we're looking at there. The warm front's not going to go far up to the north, or far enough up to the north. So more of just some freezing rain, the potential for some snow, rain. Snow is probably a low chance, but overall there would at least be some rain. You might see some flurries, like, you know, maybe going into late Wednesday, but the threat's still low. Not really any accumulation there. Thank you, Dana, for the $4.99. I'm curious, what does significant severe on the SPC probability or probabilistic outlook? Man, you're using terms that I can barely even pronounce. Outlook mean in the Ohio for Wednesday. Oh, yeah, I got you. Hi from Cleveland, Ohio. Nice. Yeah. So on Wednesday, this is not an updated outlook, by the way. It is updated, or the significant I think is probably updated. Let me just double check. I'll pull up the Storm Prediction Center site again. No, it's not. Let's go and pull this up. So this is the significant threat going into Wednesday. What this would probably be for, I haven't read the discussion, I'm not gonna lie, I haven't really looked that far ahead. I've been so focused on tomorrow because it's gonna be a lot more significant, but I'm pretty sure this is gonna be for damaging winds. I'll double check though for you, but that significant threat would probably be for the damaging wind threat. I highly doubt this is for the tornado risk because I don't think it's gonna be as high. Yeah, so this will be for cells capable of producing tornadoes and extensive wind damage. So damaging winds is the main concern. There could be a few tornadoes, though. I did mention this earlier. Those are the main two concerns for Wednesday. There very well could, though, be a little bit of large hail as well. So that's what we're looking at least going into Wednesday right now. So yeah, that would be damaging winds primarily. Thank you again for the $4.99. All right, let me just double check if we have any other things on here. All right, no, we don't. All right, cool. Thank you, Joker, for the $5 super chat. How is Chicago looking overall? Chicago's going to be another interesting area. Let's go back to the Midwest again, if I can find it somewhere. All right, so yeah, again, the Midwest is a bit of an interesting area because you could see multiple rounds of storms. You also could just maybe see one or two. So going into tomorrow morning, again, maybe an isolated storm. It's not going to be severe for the most part. The only severe weather that may occur tomorrow morning would probably be out of any convection back from Champaign into Indianapolis, as well as going into Bloomington. But once we get closer to the afternoon hours, that is when those discrete cells could form and develop and blow up. For Galesburg, Davenport, this is a bit of a concerning area for some of those discrete cells. So again, make sure you have multiple ways to receive alerts, especially, I really cannot stress this enough. If you're over here, and if you know anybody in this region, by the way, make sure they have multiple ways to receive alerts. This is my most concerning area for tomorrow, is Davenport, Galesburg, Peoria, anywhere basically just to the west of Chicago has that highest risk right now for some discrete cells, which those could very well produce a tornado threat quite quickly. But going closer to about 7 to 8 o'clock, the thing is how far north this warm front goes and how far north all the moisture does go to the north as well. By the time these discrete cells are moving towards Chicago, if there isn't a whole lot left in terms of if there's like, again, if the warm front, let's just say, is here, which that's basically what the HR model is looking at here, the cells would likely weaken off as they move off to the north. However, if that warm front is much further off to the north and the dew points, Chicago would maybe be under the gun for an isolated severe storm closer to about 8 o'clock. We'll have another chance for severe weather overnight, probably by Wednesday morning, and then eventually going closer to around 9 to 10 o'clock. That is when severe weather will likely begin to ramp up going into Wednesday morning. That is when some damaging wind threat will be back in play, as well as maybe a tornado or two across this region. So that's what we're looking at in terms of Chicago. It's a bit tricky on this forecast as well. I'm going to mention this a bunch, but again, tomorrow's forecast is tricky. This is not an easy, it's definitely going to happen. This is basically my confidence scale. I'll put it on a scale, right? So here's a 1 to 10 scale. This is a 10. This is a 1. Basically, 1 is I have no confidence at all. 10 is I have a ton of confidence. On Friday, last Friday, I had confidence around an 8 to a 9. So I'll just put 8 for last Friday. I'll just put Friday. For this event, I'm not lying. Like, my confidence right now is around like a 3 to a 4. That's basically where it's at, because there's just so much uncertainty on how far north this warm front goes, how far north the dew points go. Will the low-level jet be strong enough where the upper-level winds be able to have these updrafts be intense enough throughout areas in Illinois and Iowa? That's kind of where I'm at right now in terms of the different modes of severe weather. Now, there will probably still be 2 to 3 rounds of severe weather. Let's keep that in mind. The first one would be those discrete cells during the afternoon across areas like western Illinois and eastern Iowa, and then back over in Iowa and Missouri, and as well as back through Arkansas and even Texas. That is when that linear line of storms will likely develop overnight. I have a lot of confidence in both of those scenarios. Just the question is, what will the intensity be of all these storms tomorrow? Seems like the intensity will be the highest out of those discrete cells here across this region. But again, further off to the west, when that linear line of storms develops, that is where there's a lot of uncertainty still, that linear line. I still have a lot of uncertainty with that still, but we'll probably know more on that tomorrow when we actually have some of these weather balloons going up into the atmosphere. Obviously, by the afternoon, we'll have more details on that. But for right now, again, a little bit of uncertainty on that squall line. But I want you to be prepared as if all of this will be happening, including the discrete cells tomorrow afternoon and the linear line of storms that could also develop going into the late evening and overnight hours, because that'll be a nocturnal threat most likely. All right, thank you, Andrew, for the 199. Is there a high chance of a tornado? I don't even know what I just said. I almost said like tortoise or something. Is there a high chance of a tornado though in McHenry, Illinois? Let me check where that is. No, it's a lower threat over that direction. Anywhere in the Chicago suburbs is a lower chance tomorrow. What is your personal opinion on the Arkansas area for those embedded tornadoes in the overnight? Let me go back over there. I'm just going to probably use this map. It's a little bit easier. So for Arkansas, the overnight threat, it's definitely there. I think it's going to be a bit higher over here, to be honest with you. I think the threat level is fine right now. I'm not saying it's going to be like higher than what it actually is right now, but I still think the threat is like medium to maybe close to high. The nocturnal threat does exist though. I can see here going into the overnight hours, there could be a couple of discrete cells near Fort Smith or Russellville. Those could cause some concern for maybe a couple of tornadoes. But going into the overnight hours, that is when a line of storms will begin to develop. There could be a couple of embedded tornadoes in that line of storms. This is where we'll have a bit more of a low to medium tornado threat. The tornado threat would be higher if any discrete cells form. So again, back near 1 a.m., if we have any discrete cells like this, the tornado threat would naturally be a bit higher. But with the linear line of storms overnight into Wednesday morning, that threat does become a bit lower. Now, there is a chance that we see some discrete cells during the afternoon hours, by the way. The threat is not zero by any means. I know it doesn't show on the HR model, but there is a chance for that. The threat still kind of remains on the lower side, though, anyways. Obviously, the HR model doesn't show it. If we go to the 18Z model run, it kind of shows a little bit of convection, but it really doesn't get popping. If the cap is overcome down here, we could see a couple of those discrete cells, but I still think that threat is low right now. And you can actually see here going to the overnight hours, it does show a little bit more of that. So yeah, the cap will be in play tomorrow for sure across a large chunk of the tornado risk area, as well as this entire severe weather threat area. There you are, Clutch, for the $2 super chat. A bit worried about the... I don't know how to say that name in Wisconsin. I wish Connie Shaw was here. She knows how to literally pronounce every single town and city in Wisconsin. That area, I would say, is kind of still on the low to medium end of that tornado risk. It's there, but I wouldn't be too worried about it. I wouldn't be like concerned. Again, I'm not... For anybody that's in this area, you do not have to panic or, be super concerned. Just make sure you have ways to receive alerts, take the proper precautions tonight, and be prepared. You literally will be fine if you do all that. At least, you know, you'll be prepared for this entire event. So make sure you do all that. You'll be good. Waukesha. Waukesha? Okay, I think I got it. All right, if you have any questions, leave them in the chat. We don't have any more super chats, so I can kind of answer some of the chat questions here. So if you have any questions, feel free to let me know. Again, there's still a lot of other stuff that we can talk about here. I've talked about a lot. I didn't realize, but again, for those that might just be tuning in, we did a full 35-minute forecast, and I didn't even realize it. I'm not going to lie. We can actually look at some of these other computer models, too. We've been... I'll be honest. I look at the HR model all the time. I have a lot of confidence in it, obviously, because I use it all the time. I mean, this is another computer model that we can look at. This is the... I mean, we can just kind of look at whatever we want, but this is the HRW FV3. This one I do use a little bit. It's typically a little bit overdone, but this is around tomorrow afternoon. This is another possibility. We could see some significant supercells form during the afternoon. I know you don't see all the dark reds and pinks and all that, but this model doesn't go to that reflectivity value, so just keep that in mind. But back over in western Illinois and southwest portions of Wisconsin, we very well could see some discrete cells here, and then by the evening hours, you can actually see back over here in Iowa, this is also a potential for some discrete cells back near Des Moines, and as well as back through Mason City. Those areas could be in that threat for some discrete supercells, and eventually going into the overnight hours, that is when, again, that significant severe weather threat may exist there. And then that linear line of storms is something that I don't have a whole lot of confidence on right now in Iowa or even in Missouri and as well as Illinois. So yeah, again, another computer model to look at. It looks a lot crazier here on this computer model though, which I think this is a little bit overdone, I'll be honest, but we'll see. I don't think Nashville will be too bad. Nashville's primarily going to be damaging winds, if anything. That'll be for Wednesday, by the way. DFW Metroplex, do I need to worry? There is some severe weather that has been ongoing in DFW tonight. I was actually posting about it on Facebook. The threat is going down pretty quickly, though. There's only a storm near Walnut Springs and Morgan. I'm not concerned about severe weather tonight in DFW. Tomorrow's a little bit different. Mainly east of Dallas. That's where some severe weather could happen. I'm not concerned about DFW specifically for tomorrow, by the way. Sorry, I'm using an office chair, or again, I have like, it's not a new office chair, it's still the one it's really crappy, but the office chair I had to put a blanket on because the cushion was super uncomfortable. I'm telling you, this office chair is like my worst nightmare. Thank you, Emmett, for the $2 super chat. What about Springfield, Missouri? Let's go over to there. The Springfield, anywhere in Missouri is kind of a bit of a toss-up, I'll be real with you, but we'll go over to here. This includes like the entire state, but the threat for maybe an isolated round of storms does exist during the mid to late evening hours, so maybe around 5 to 8 o'clock or so. We might see a couple of storms there. The threat for southern Missouri primarily begins overnight. That is when that line of storms will develop back out to the west, and that could push through areas like Springfield. I know the HRR model kind of just makes it dissipate once it goes through there, but you very well could see some severe weather out of that. Damaging winds would definitely be the main concern, but also a couple of embedded tornadoes in that line will also be possible. So your threat is probably going to be more of an overnight concern with that being said. So that's my bigger concern at this point for those areas. No problem, Gima. Yeah, I'm trying to answer all the questions I can. I'm not just, by the way, I'm not like, this is not like a pay to ask sort of stream. I literally do not do that stuff. It's just easier to see super chats because there are so many different questions, but you do not have to super chat to ask questions. I'm literally answering other ones as well. And hopefully I answered your question already, but obviously I know there will be a lot of other ones. A lot of you are wondering like specific timing and stuff like that. Again, I've gone over a lot of that stuff, but I will be answering some of those as well. Let me just double check real quick on North Texas weather here real quick. All right, so all right, we're good there. Yeah, again, there was actually, believe it or not, there was a couple of supercells in DFW tonight that were severe. There's actually a storm that produced baseball-sized hail tonight just south of DFW. I don't know if any of you heard about that. Actually, real quick, since I feel like doing it, and I kind of wanted to show you guys this real quick. We'll go back to the weather tomorrow here in a second. There's not a tornado warning ongoing. Ignore that. Do this. And we'll go ahead and put on the 2-hour loop here. This is the severe weather that we saw back down in DFW tonight. We actually saw baseball-sized hail reports back near Hyco, Texas. We actually had severe weather here yesterday. I'm not sure if this will allow me to go back 2 hours, but yeah, again, this was an area that we actually saw some significant hail tonight. You can see here the warning boxes and stuff like that. I'm just going to minimize this for now. We'll see if it's going to load here over the next couple of minutes, so we'll see if that loads back up. But yeah, it was kind of crazy. We had a couple of supercells tonight, which was in the forecast, by the way. There was a cap in place, but it was expected to kind of erode since the temperatures were going to be so warm today. So I'll show you guys that here in a second if it pops up. What's the thoughts for St. Louis? St. Louis is probably going to be mainly a damaging wind threat for St. Louis, but there might be a little bit of large hail, maybe an isolated tornado threat. Thank you for the $4.99 as well. Appreciate it. Grand Rapids, Michigan on Wednesday will probably be mainly a damaging wind threat. A low-end tornado threat does also exist. How's it going, Clay, by the way? You're doing well. As well as Virginia. How you guys doing? For some reason, this loop does not want to load. All right, it might load now. I'm going to let this run, and hopefully it actually loads. Yeah, it's loading now. All right, cool. How's Northern Indiana looking? Northern Indiana is going to be an area. Let me go back to the timing here. So, I have so many tabs open. I'm just going to keep playing around with these. I don't really care. All right, so let's go through Northern Indiana. So, Northern Indiana, anywhere in this area is more of a Wednesday morning threat, and as well as into the early afternoon. You'll notice that here, once we get closer to about Wednesday morning around 10 a.m., that is when a line of storms will be going on along that cold front back over to the west near Chicago, as well as back through Champaign. This is where that threat for some severe weather will definitely exist. Once we get closer to 1 to 2 o'clock, that is when storms move off to the east. These ones will be more capable of a slightly higher tornado risk than the other storms, as well as the damaging wind potential will be the main two concerns. So damaging winds and a tornado risk, the two main concerns across this area. But I wouldn't rule out, again, maybe an isolated large hail storm or two. It's not impossible at all. It's a low threat, though, I'd say. Thank you, Isabella, for the $1. Appreciate it. Chicago is not safe. You are under the threat for severe weather tomorrow. Make sure you have multiple ways to receive alerts. All right, I have kind of the entire loop on. Maybe not. All right, still doesn't want to do the entire loop. Never mind. I was going to show you the storm from earlier. There are still some storms out there, but yeah, that's over in DFW. I was hoping it would go back 2 hours, but it didn't. There was baseball-sized hail, though, at least reported, 3-inch diameter, actually, close to Hyco, Texas tonight. Still have a storm over near Walnut Springs producing at least some small hail, but threats overall still kind of low. Thank you, Joseph, for the $5 super chat. How's Bloomington, Southern Indiana looking? Bloomington is going to be another, again, kind of interesting area. Anywhere in Indiana has, like, multiple rounds of storms to be watching out for, and one of which will begin potentially going into Wednesday early morning. That's when one complex of storms will be possible, and believe it or not, actually, tomorrow morning, we could see a few storms there. I mean, I'm not even ruling that out. There could be some convection tomorrow morning, which could boil up, maybe potentially produce some marginal severe weather, so some damaging winds, maybe a little bit of large hail also being possible here. But that's tomorrow morning. Wednesday morning is when another little area of storms may be possible, but once we get closer to the late morning and afternoon, that is when some more significant severe weather may be possible with that area back near the cold front. That is more concerning. That could potentially produce, again, damaging winds and maybe a low-end tornado risk as well. That would primarily be from Portage and as well as into really central Michigan, back all the way through Indiana. That is where the highest threat would exist. That would be right around lunchtime, maybe just after for Bloomington, and then you'll be done by late Wednesday. Thank you for the $5 super chat again. Appreciate it. Sorry, if you say hi or hello, Nightbot usually says hi back, and if you keep saying it, it'll just keep saying hi back. I programmed it to do that, and I don't know why. That's redundant if you keep saying hi. Detroit's the same way, by the way. Detroit is going to be like the same sort of way in terms of the severe weather. Actually, I can do Michigan timing. I did not do Michigan timing, mainly due to the fact I did a regional view of this. But overall, severe weather tomorrow, very low chance. There might be an isolated storm. The HRR model is picking up on one of those. Going into Wednesday morning, that is when storms may become a bit more increased, but I would expect the main threat during the afternoon. That is when, again, along that cold front, we'll have a bit more of significant severe weather. Damaging winds being the main concern with this. but a tornado threat will still exist. It's a low tornado threat, I would say right now. I'm not expecting this to be that high. In comparison to tomorrow. Tomorrow's threat is higher for sure, but there might be at least some sort of low-end tornado threat here across Michigan, and Detroit would see those storms most likely closer to the evening hours. So that's the timing right now for Michigan. There you go, Mystic for the $4.99. Will the hail threat in Michigan on Wednesday be concerning? No, I wouldn't say so. Maybe it's gonna be low. So, I mean, if you consider a low-end $1.50 sized hail threat to be concerning, then there you go. But it's a low threat. Be more of a damaging wind concern overall. Thank you, Mine, for the $2 super chat. Ohio, Northwest Ohio near Toledo. I know where Toledo is, actually. Believe it or not, that's one city for some reason. I know where it is. Toledo is going to be more of a threat going into Wednesday. It's not going to be a Tuesday threat. It'll be a Wednesday threat. That's when storms can be possible. I don't know if you can see it on the screen here. Yeah, it's on the very far eastern side of your screen, or very far eastern side of your screen, very far right side of your screen. Severe weather would be possible pretty much around the same time as Detroit, so probably going closer to like 4 to 5 o'clock on Wednesday, sometime in that time frame. But again, give or take a few hours, things do change a little bit. Cold front has been slowing down the slightest bit recently, by the way, which has kind of thrown off some of the severe weather threat for tomorrow a bit. That's why uncertainty has grown a little bit. The cold front is slowing down like the ever so slightest bit, and it's really throwing things off with the overall timing of this entire event now. So things have changed a little bit. Hey, Astro, or I don't know how to say your name, but I appreciate your $10 super chat. Greetings. How does Centralville, Illinois, I keep saying Illinois, Centralville, Iowa, looking for tomorrow? We look where Centerville, Iowa is. All right, so far southeast Iowa. Yeah, that's an area that has... This is an area that's tricky because where the storms fire up is a bit of a question mark right now. What will trigger these severe storms and where is still kind of to be determined, but this is where we're probably going to be seeing some discrete supercells forming sometime between about 2 to 5 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. So I'll make it a little bit bigger because it's a bit more reasonable. So it'd probably be across this region where we start to see those initial discrete supercells. Those are the ones that are capable of a rapidly increasing tornado risk as well as damaging winds and hail. So these are the most concerning storms closer to around 5 to 6 o'clock. Those move off to the north and east. Now, I know you mentioned Centerville. You are obviously in the threat for those significant storms. This is just one computer model run, but further back off to the west, we very well could still see some significant severe weather. So just make sure you have all ways to receive alert, have multiple ways to receive alerts, and make sure you have your tornado action plan in place tonight, because again, we will probably see some pretty significant severe weather there. And again, you're in that hatched area. We very well may see the hatched area actually shift slightly to the west overnight tonight, as well as this tornado risk. It may actually shift a bit further to the west, or at least extend a bit further to the west. It might go like, you know, maybe like this a little bit, because there actually might be a couple of storms that actually fire up back near Des Moines that could actually rapidly become severe as well. Depending on if round 1.5 basically happens. I'm calling it round 1.5 because that's pretty much what it is. Holy cow. There are I have a 15-second slow mode on and the questions are still going absolutely insane. Will Chicago be bad? I've mentioned Chicago multiple times. Again, Chicago's going to have multiple rounds of storms, potentially. One of which will be during probably the evening hours or at least the late afternoon tomorrow. That might occur, but it's still a low chance. A lot of uncertainty still there. My confidence in any severe weather in Chicago before like 10 o'clock tomorrow is still fairly low right now. I don't think there'll be a whole lot there. If anything does happen, though, again, damaging winds, large hail, isolated tornado threat would exist. But going into the overnight hours, that is when a line of storms will develop, and eventually going into the morning hours on Wednesday is when severe weather will pick back up near Chicago. So those are like the two threats. One of which will be probably during the late afternoon, maybe early evening hours. We might see a storm, but if you don't, then it'll be probably going into Wednesday morning. And the main reason why going into tomorrow, why there's so much uncertainty there going into these storms, is how far north this warm front goes. If it doesn't go far enough north, the moisture and all that other humidity just will not go far enough to the north for supercells to really be able to live long term. And the upper level winds have to be strong enough as well to keep these updrafts intense, which again, that's a little bit uncertain too. So that's what we're looking at right now for that. Yeah, that goes for anybody in the suburbs of Chicago, so I just answered the question for literally anybody in the suburbs. If you're in Rockford, you definitely have a pretty solid chance of a storm around probably 4 to 8 o'clock if those storms are able to develop back down here near Quincy. Friendly reminder, by the way, if you're just tuning in for the first time, make sure to subscribe down below. Again, we do live streams like this all the time. We're currently, literally, we're only 9 subscribers from 42,500, so make sure to subscribe down below. Like the stream as well if you've been enjoying so far. Would appreciate it. Let me go over to here real quick. I have another question. Is Evansville under a large threat? Evansville, Indiana, I'm guessing you're meaning. So Evansville's not under a large threat, or classify it as a high threat. You're not under like a high threat or anything like that. I wouldn't even say you're really in a medium threat. I would say you're kind of in the lower threat, to be honest with you. I don't think Evansville will be as significant as you might think. There will be most likely multiple rounds of storms, one of which could happen even tomorrow morning, but that would probably stay off to your north. Another round going into overnight Tuesday night into Wednesday morning. That would mainly be damaging winds if it does occur. And then eventually going into Wednesday morning, a lot of storm activity then. That is when damaging winds is possible, as well as maybe some large hail, and potentially some flooding is not out of the question as well. There'll be a lot of rain in this region going into Wednesday, and if we go ahead and pull up the rainfall totals that are being estimated going into Wednesday, you might notice here near Evansville, there might be some pockets here upwards of like 1 to 3 inches of rain. So that's a concern out of that little area of storms as we go into Wednesday. But I would not be, I'm not overly concerned about a tornado risk anywhere near Evansville at this point. We're looking at there. All right. I don't think I missed anything else here. All right, if you have any regular questions, feel free to let me know in the chat. I'll be looking at more of those again. Is Texas under any threat? Yes, Texas tomorrow is under an enhanced risk of severe weather. Let me actually, believe it or not, I have custom graphics for this I can actually pull up. Let me pull that up for you. So this is North Texas tomorrow, because this is basically the only area that's actually in the threat. I have to go to this screen for this, but this is the threat level for tomorrow. And again, the main threat is going to be back up to the, basically above me, for Paris, Tyler, all these areas. That's where our enhanced risk of severe weather is. Slight risk just outside of that, and then we also have a moderate risk of severe weather that's not in Texas. That's just to the north of there. I don't think Northeast Texas will go into a moderate risk, but we could see this actually, this marginal and slight risk will probably extend further to the south and west, honestly, tomorrow morning. I would expect the Storm Prediction Center actually shifts this further to the south. Enhanced risk will probably go down to like here, or not maybe that far. It'll probably at least go down to like here, though. Slight risk will probably go like down to maybe like here ish, and then marginal maybe down here, something like that. I don't know, just a general sketch, but I do think it'll go down a bit further down to the south, because we will probably see a little bit more storm activity then. One small chance during the afternoon. The threat though increases more during the evening and overnight hours. Overnight hours is a much higher threat. There might be an isolated storm during the afternoon hours, and if the cap ends up breaking. There's a brush fire ongoing in Flint Hills, Kansas City. Or not Kansas City. Flint Hills, Kansas. That's what I meant. Behind the dry line, there's a brush fire over there. Reed Timmer just posted a video on Twitter if you guys want to check that out. When will the risks be upgraded next? I'm pretty sure 2 a.m. Eastern. Which is so late. You guys, it's kind of funny. So many of you might remember a few weeks ago, before daylight savings, all the risks were posted an hour earlier. That was so much more convenient. Now that the risks get posted like an hour later, which is like 2 a.m. usually, I'm pretty sure it's 2 a.m. now, Eastern time. It is so much later. I typically do not stay up now for 2 a.m. risks. I would if it was 1 a.m., but yeah, the daylight savings drives me nuts. I wish it was still the before the or 2 a.m. Tucker, it's fine. Tucker, you can go to bed. It's 10:45. I got the chat. I will be moderating the chat. It's fine. We are short on moderators tonight. All right, let me do, we'll do 15 seconds. Is there a risk for the Des Moines area? Yeah, Des Moines is in that risk of severe weather. Let's go back over to here and let's go to the regional view. For some reason I have so many tabs open and this is just one that I cannot find. All right, so this is currently the threat for severe weather for tomorrow. Again, Des Moines is in the enhanced risk. I wouldn't be surprised if this moderate risk creeps slightly to the west. I would not be surprised if it does go slightly further to the west. I do think that threat is slightly higher back near Des Moines and near the interstate as well. This is an area that the threat may increase just the slightest bit. Again, this is where we might see a few discrete cells form, potentially closer to the evening hours if the cap is basically overcome in this area. But the threat right now is still, the confidence is low. The threat is definitely there though. If any storms do develop, we could very well see some rapidly changing conditions. This is the HRR model at 8 o'clock. We might, if these storms develop an hour earlier, they would probably form back here near Des Moines or Mason City. So keep that in the back of your head. The threat definitely does exist tomorrow. Again, tornado risk is the highest thing basically, along with damaging winds and hail. Thank you, Connor, for the $5 super chat. Here in St. Louis, what mode should I chase? Nocturnal, Arkansas, Missouri, or Iowa, Illinois? If you're trying to chase basically the best chance of seeing like a tornado or something like that, I would probably go with the Illinois and Iowa threat, in my opinion. That'll probably be the more significant of the two threats. But yeah, that's what I'm thinking at least. Yeah, if you're trying to chase tomorrow, that is what I would recommend at this point. But if you're, you know, if you're just like, if you're an amateur chaser, you should definitely chase a daytime threat, not a nighttime threat. Nighttime threats are much more dangerous to chase too. Yeah, Illinois, Iowa, definitely more concerning. And also, the tornado risk is higher. Because if these cells do end up developing, which the chances right now, my confidence in these storms developing somewhere either between western Illinois or into central Iowa, my confidence there is like medium, but the threat would be probably higher overall. If we're talking about, you know, an actual initiator near these storms. But overall, the tornado threat is definitely higher. If any storms develop, that tornado risk is definitely going to be increased. Is Collin County concerning? Not really, no. Just isolated damaging winds, if anything. All right, I just lost a lot of questions because the entire chat just got spammed. Let me zoom back up here a second. Yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to leave those in the chat. And again, if you're new here, make sure to subscribe to the channel and like the stream if you've been enjoying it so far. And we do live streams like this all the time. And yeah, again, I might go live tomorrow at some point. I will not be live for the event, as I mentioned before. I already have something planned after 3 o'clock, and I'm not gonna be able to change it. So I will not be live for the actual event. But if there's any changes before 3 o'clock, I might go live. I'm not gonna guarantee it, but just a reminder in that department. There will be plenty of other people live, by the way. So if you need live coverage, you'll be able to find it really easily. I'm assuming there's gonna be a ton of people live. So. And also, I would not be able to be live for more than like 3 hours. My back was, I did a 5-hour live stream yesterday. My back was in so much pain, and it still is today. I literally need an office chair. This office chair is not working at all. So, it's good times. Significant tornadoes in Stevenson County, Illinois. Let me figure out where Stevenson County is. There is a threat for a significant tornado there. Yeah, I mean, if any storms, again, the warm front is a big question here. We go back over to the temperature map, wherever that went. Gotta find it. Here's the temperature map. The warm front is a question mark. Again, if it goes far enough to the north, which it likely will be, going far enough to the north, here's your warm front. It kind of goes, this is the HRR model. We'll actually go to the most recent model run here. This is the warm front. And the HRR model, this is the most recent run. The warm front doesn't go as far north as before. It's creeping slightly further down to the south. And this is a big change here. I've been mentioning the warm front a lot. The further south it is, essentially means that the threat will be more condensed further to the south. And this is at about 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock or so. This is 6, 7 o'clock. It may just get warm enough to the north for an isolated storm, but significant severe weather becomes a lot less likely in this area, which right now there is like an enhanced risk or a moderate risk for a couple of those areas. Still make sure that you have all ways to receive alerts, multiple ways, and also make sure you have a tornado action plan in place. But right now, things are at least changing in a slightly positive direction for those areas. Because the warm front, again, is a big critical thing here. If the warm front doesn't go far enough to the north, the humidity will also not go far enough to the north. It's basically like a capped off lid here on how far north where the dew points go and whatnot. But things may change a little bit tomorrow. The cold front has slowed down a little bit, which is kind of, messing things up a little bit. But you can eventually notice going into the evening and overnight hours that warm front does end up going much further to the north here. But the more significant severe weather threat is during the afternoon hours. So just keep that in mind. Yeah, I've been mentioning that a lot. The warm front, the dew points, they all kind of correlate basically there. Thank you, Justin, for the $5 super chat, by the way. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, Tyler, for becoming a Storm Chaser member. I appreciate that as well. Thank you. Ow. I'm telling you, my back already hurts. I've only been live for an hour and 15 minutes, and this office chair is so bad. I am currently working on my actual old one being fixed, but I'm not sure if it'll actually be fixed. Thank you, Devin, for the generous $20 super chat. How is Tulsa looking? Tulsa shouldn't be bad. Let's go to the future radar. But Tulsa shouldn't be too bad. You're kind of on the cusp, obviously, of that like higher end risk of severe weather. Here's Oklahoma, though, going into tomorrow. There might be a couple of isolated storms that develop during the afternoon. The HRR model actually does not pick up on a whole lot here. During the evening, it does pick up a little bit more on that activity, but that's like south of Tulsa, maybe near McAllister, southeast Oklahoma. You eventually can see here, this is when the threat, this is when the threat of severe weather, though, exists a bit more, would be during the evening hours. If that linear line of storms is able to develop along the cold front, there is a chance that Tulsa sees maybe a little bit of damaging winds. Wouldn't rule out an isolated brief tornado threat or something like that near Tulsa, but that threat does remain low at this point. Eventually, by the overnight hours, that line will be pushing through eastern Oklahoma. But again, I still think that threat is overall kind of low right now. But damaging winds is a bit more concerning. I wouldn't be too concerned, though, on the tornado risk. Another Devin just said in chat, crap, you scared me. I thought I somehow accidentally spent money. No, you did not. You were good. Sorry, there's a lot of I try to go just by the most simple name I can go by, because saying like a full name is a little bit more difficult. Sometimes. Some of them are hard to pronounce. His last name isn't too hard. Thank you, Slim, for the $1.99. Chattanooga, anything rough coming? Yeah. Are you talking about Chattanooga, Tennessee? Guessing that's what you're probably talking about. I don't know if there's any other Chattanoogas in the United States. Chattanooga would be mainly a damaging wind threat, and that would be on Wednesday. But otherwise, not too concerned. Thanks, Shane, for the one. I appreciate it. Any significant risks of tornadoes in central Illinois, like Springfield? Right now for Springfield, I wouldn't say it's significant, even though there is a hatched area here. There is a threat for, obviously, a tornado. It depends on where these supercells do develop going into Tuesday. Again, here's your timing right now from the HRR model. Storms could fire up, though, across any of this area here. A few discrete cells, and if any do develop, the tornado risk will naturally be higher with those discrete cells. So Springfield could be in that track as well for maybe that threat. But I would say that the overall concern right now near Springfield for a significant tornado threat is not that high. But again, make sure you have a tornado action plan in place. Do not blow this event off, by the way. I know I've been saying a lot in this stream that there's a lot of uncertainty, there's a low confidence of certain things, and that the threat of certain areas might not be as high as it looks right now or whatever. Still plan on any mode of severe weather. Again, we have a moderate risk, we have an enhanced risk. If you're anywhere in the enhanced and moderate risk, you want to make sure, you literally want to make sure right now that you have multiple ways to receive alerts, have batteries and flashlights, all that sort of stuff, charge your phones, because there very well could be some significant severe weather anywhere in this region. The HRR model is picking out those some certain areas that severe weather will occur, which I agree with pretty much at this point. But again, we could still see some curveballs in this. With how there is uncertainty with this event, we do quite often see curveballs in the forecast, and when things actually happen, they could be a bit different. So again, make sure you're monitoring the weather very closely. Ever-changing weather conditions will happen very rapidly with this sort of environment, especially across anywhere in the Midwest. So you just want to make sure you have multiple ways to receive alerts. I know I've been kind of saying, again, that this might be a little bit lower in some areas, but again, There will be some curveballs in the forecast tomorrow. Trust me. This is not a solid 100%. Yes, this is all going to happen. I mentioned this already, but on Friday, for that forecast, I had a confidence of about an 8. What actually happened was very, very close, if not almost like, it wasn't like exact, but it was obviously very close to what ended up happening. That was my confidence on a scale of 1 to 10. This event, my confidence, and really, it's like a 4. It's much lower. And I think for a lot of people, it's much lower as well. It's not just me. Just because there's some uncertainty of how far north that warm front goes, and all that sort of stuff. So there's just a lot of uncertainty in that sort of regard. And the initiators as well, will these storms actually fire off during the afternoon? Because the cold front's going to be so far back off to the north. Again, lots of uncertainty. But we'll keep you posted, again, if anything does change there. I just hit my entire monitor. Do you think the threat will be higher for tornadoes in southern Illinois? Probably not. I think the threat is fine as is, to be honest with you. Has NATOcast posted anything recently? Actually, I do want to check out NATOcast. I'm not sure if they posted anything new for tomorrow. Yeah, so this is NATOcast's most recent thing. I mean, I don't usually like completely use this. I just kind of look at it sometimes. NATOcast isn't really too far off from that sort of stuff that I've been talking about. But I still think the tornado risk is a bit higher in here for sure. This, I think, is like, this should also be higher here. Almost looks like a ghost face. But these probabilities, honestly, are not, like, they're not, like, way off the, like, at all. These are actually kind of a bit more realistic, I think. I hate to say this, but I do think I wouldn't say the tornado threat is being, like, you know, overestimated here from the Storm Prediction Center. Just the thing is, will these storms actually develop on where they're going to actually develop? That's kind of the question right now. Like, will all these storms develop? Will we see discrete cells during the afternoon or evening across this region? We probably will, especially down here. There will probably be that threat. It's, again, a nocturnal threat further to the south. It's more of an afternoon and evening threat back through the Midwest. So keep that in mind. We have 2 different timings here. It's a bit more during the afternoon and evening here. A&E, that's not, I'm not advertising A&E, the channel. And also down here, anywhere really south of St. Louis, you're more of that nocturnal threat. So this would be evening and overnight. So I'll just put over. So yeah, again, that's what we're looking at there in terms of the severe weather potential. The timing is completely different though. Again, afternoon and evening for the Midwest, evening and overnight for those in the southern plains, and as well as into anywhere in the lower Mississippi Valley, basically south of St. Louis. So yeah, that's what we're looking at right now. And really all the ingredients come together for severe weather. It's just a matter of will these storms actually develop. I've been saying that a lot. Like, that's basically what the biggest thing is, the initiators and all that sort of stuff. And the cap also being in place could kind of limit the severe weather just a little bit, but which it definitely will to some extent. But I just realized March Madness is on. Is anything happening in March Madness? What's the score? I haven't even looked. Completely forgot about that. Thank you, Clay, for the 199. Columbia, Missouri here. Any risk? Columbia, Missouri. The risk right now, I'd say, is more of a damaging wind threat. But tornado threat and hail do also exist. If it's blurry, you might have to refresh or click the gear button and then click the quality button, and you should be able to see some options there. Your internet might just be a little bit slow or something like that. That sometimes happens. Yeah, I still think, and I've said this a few times, I think Friday, what we saw on Friday was much, much worse than what we're probably going to see tomorrow. I hope I'm right on that regard, because we do not want to see a huge severe weather outbreak like what we saw last time. This will probably be a bit more of an isolated to scattered event. Last event was much more numerous and widespread. We saw several tornadoes. Multiple of those were strong. So just keep that in mind as well. Friendly reminder, if you're just tuning in for the first time, make sure to subscribe down below. It is free to do, and we do live streams and video forecasts all the time. And also make sure to like the stream. And believe it or not, today's video is now the 3rd video I've ever had over 100,000 views. I cannot believe that at all. It's literally insane. Like, I'm not even gonna lie to you guys. Like, you know, I don't even know, because I'll tell you right now, like, my videos were never my bread and butter anyways on YouTube. I was always doing live streams. My live streams, I still love doing live streams. Like, those were like my big thing for a while. And all of a sudden, videos have just been taking off recently. It's crazy. Like 3 of the last 7 forecasts, I think, have been over 100,000 views, which is wild. Appreciate the support a lot. What do you think the biggest difference is between Friday and tomorrow? Really just how widespread this event will be. 1, and then 2, where the cold front placement is, and as well as the warm front. I feel like this event is arriving kind of late. It's like kind of rushing itself to get there with this sort of setup. If we go over to here, this is a little bit better of a perspective of it. You can see it here. This is a bit more of a rushed event, though. Like, this low pressure system tomorrow at lunchtime. This is lunchtime tomorrow. Look where the low pressure system is. It is nowhere near Iowa. Well, it's definitely nowhere near Ohio. We can definitely guarantee you that. But this is nowhere near Iowa or Minnesota. It is still very far away. And I'm curious if I can pull up from Friday's event. I don't know if I can go that far back. This is Friday at 6. Does anybody have... I don't even know. I kind of wish... I could probably go back on one of my YouTube videos and find it. But this is what we're going to be looking at 12 o'clock. The last event that we had... trying to find it here. Alright, so I found one video here. And this should have... I do the same thing for the first 2 slides in every stream anyways. So, alright, this is a great example. Like, literally, this is a perfect example of what we're talking about here. So look at this. You cannot look at this. Here we go. So this is a perfect example. Look at where this low pressure system is here. This is at the same... This is actually earlier in the day. This is at 6 a.m. That is where the low pressure system's located. In Iowa, Nebraska, and Kansas. I'm going to see if we can go any further ahead here to 18Z. There we go. This is 18Z. Look at where it's centered. Iowa, Minnesota. That's where this low pressure system is. Look at where it is on this screen. At the same exact time during the afternoon. This is 1 o'clock. It is nowhere near where it was before. This is the difference. This is Friday. Friday, the low pressure system is literally sitting there. Tuesday, this thing is rushing to get over there. That's like the big difference here. I've been saying it. How far north will this warm air go? How far north will the dew points go? All that sort of stuff. They're still very far apart. Like that's like the biggest difference here. So that's Friday. That's Tuesday. Big difference. And I'm telling you, it's trying to rush itself to basically get over to Iowa and Minnesota. And we can go to like 21Z, which is 3 hours after. It's at that same exact spot at... I can't talk. This is at the same exact spot as where Friday's was, but this is 9 hours later than where Friday's was. If you're seeing what I'm saying here, there's a massive difference. Again, this is... I'll try to get a good color here. This right here, though, is 9 hours later. 9 hours later than what happened this past Friday. There's still a big, big difference there with where they are. So, yeah. Again, that's a fascinating compare and contrast sort of thing. I was trying to find that, but I couldn't pull it up. But there we go. Yeah, that's the comparison. Again, that's the big difference between this event and Friday. If this low pressure system was sitting up here, the same exact spot at, lunchtime tomorrow, we would be talking about a full-blown tornado outbreak, probably, I wouldn't even, I wouldn't say a super outbreak, but it would be, kind of close to it. It would probably be worse than Friday. But this low-pressure system, with it lagging behind in terms of timing, is going to struggle to really get going. And all the moisture that's going to try to suck in, basically, is all the way down here, and that's not going to get up there into where it needs to be until probably just after lunchtime. So, there you go. That's the big compare and contrast there. That was a good question, whoever asked that. I don't know who asked that. There's somebody, but it's a great question. The cap is essentially a temperature inversion in the atmosphere. In simplistic terms, it's like a lid, so clouds will start to bubble up. Let's just say they get up to here. Let's just say this is like 10,000 feet off the ground. So let's say that's 10,000 feet. Clouds will essentially be stopped from growing past a certain point if the temperature all of a sudden starts warming up. So the temperature, let's say where this 10,000 millibar or 10,000 feet height is, let's say the temperature is like 70 degrees, which it's never that warm that high, by the way. But let's just say at 9,000 feet, it was like 75, or let's just say it was 65 degrees. the temperature is essentially warming up. That stops clouds from developing. Once that cap is overcome by either some sort of temperatures cooling aloft or warming at the surface, then eventually those clouds will start to build up past that point, and then we'll have supercell thunderstorms. I have tutorial videos on that, by the way, on my YouTube channel, but Virginia, you can watch the first 35 minutes of this forecast for all your answers. First 35 minutes. I don't think many people have that much time to be looking at weather data for 35 minutes. Stop the cap. I would say let's actually have the cap. I wouldn't say stop the cap. I do get your joke. Talk about the cold or the cooled side of the system. Describe what it does to the warm front. I'm not sure what you exactly mean. Let me go to the temperatures here. Wherever my temperature map went, I have so many tabs open. I've said this like 90 times. So talking about this, the warm front or whatever. Ooh, zoom out a little bit. The warm front's actually pretty impressive with this. If you look at the temperature map here, the temperatures in Nebraska, the highest temperature will be around 90 degrees most likely, while the 20s will be ongoing in Nebraska, by the way. One part of Nebraska will be dealing with the potential for severe weather. The other will be dealing with the potential for a blizzard, believe it or not. Crazy stuff, I know. Yeah, so the upper level winds, if we go to the upper level winds here, which the jet stream is, that's upper level winds when I'm talking about that. Let me figure out where I actually have that on here. These are the upper level winds. So this is your jet stream. And when we have a stronger jet stream with very strong southwesterly flow, this flow, by the way, is actually on the European models become more southerly. It's still southwestish, southwest. It's still favorable of severe weather, but it's kind of interesting there. But when we have a very strong jet stream like this, that helps to create more lift with these supercells. So when we have a very strong upper level wind pattern like this, that's going to help to create more lift and really keep these, or not lift, more more instability basically with these severe storms, and it basically lets these storms with their updrafts stay more intense for a longer period of time, and the ones back over in the Midwest during the afternoon and evening hours will have that basically perk of being able to stay alive longer due to that. But the problem still is, back through areas in the Midwest, is how far north this warm front goes. And I mentioned this before, if those discrete cells do develop around 4 or 5 o'clock, there's not going to be enough time for that warm air to lift further to the north. Here's your warm air. That's basically your dividing line here. It's a little bit further to the south. That's your dividing line. Once these storms run into this warm front and go further to the north, they're going to struggle to stay alive because there's so much cooler air and a lot drier air north of that cold front. So that's the problem with tomorrow with any storms that try to go into Wisconsin. Unless this warm front does lift further to the north much quicker, which it's currently not forecasted to do until overnight Tuesday into Wednesday morning. I've mentioned this before, tomorrow's event is going to be so delayed in comparison to what we saw on Friday. Friday's low pressure system at lunchtime was up here. Literally the entire morning, the low pressure system was sitting over Iowa, Nebraska, South Dakota, and Minnesota. Tomorrow, at the same time, literally this is at lunchtime, this is not even in the morning, it is still way back down here. They are so different in terms of timing. That makes this event have a lot less confidence in a lot of regards. That makes this severe weather event basically a lot more delayed. If this low pressure system was in the same position as this on Friday, we'd be talking about a full-blown tornado outbreak. The problem is, though, that is kind of a bit of a question mark. So where that low pressure system basically sets up, and if everything will be in place by then, which, again, I've mentioned a few times, is a huge point of uncertainty. Thank you for the $5 super chat from Ajax. What time of the day do you think the greatest concern for Cedar Rapids? Cedar Rapids. Cedar Rapids, probably the greatest concern is the afternoon and evening. You should be able to go to bed. The line of storms, if you do see it, which is definitely entirely possible, would be overnight. That'd probably be somewhere between about 12 to 3. But the overall threat for significant severe weather with that right now in eastern Iowa is kind of low. The confidence on this is pretty low right now with how strong the squall line would actually be, if it is even a squall line, back up in Iowa. But stay tuned. Make sure you stay updated with your local weather forecast too, in case anything drastically changes. I don't know if I'll be able to go live tomorrow for like an update video during like the late morning or early afternoon, if anything drastically changes. But if something does, obviously just make sure you're staying tuned with that. But I don't think anything will drastically change with Cedar Rapids. I think that line of storms is going to be a bit weaker than what a lot of people have been saying. But we'll see. Again, things could change. It could be much stronger than what it looks like. It's kind of just a matter of how organized this low pressure system is by tomorrow late day. That's the big thing right now. How's everybody doing, by the way, tonight? Hope everybody's doing well. Also, another question. Where are you guys all from? You don't have to actually say your city, but I'm just curious, whatever everybody's state is currently. Or state or country, wherever you might be watching. I usually don't ever ask people. Let me check something real quick. Florida, Illinois, Germany. Germany's pretty cool. I've never been to Germany before. New York, Texas, Michigan, Oregon. A lot of people from the Midwest, and I do have a lot of Midwest viewers. Holy cow, subscribers. Alaska? Somebody's from Alaska in the chat. You're watching severe weather live streams in Alaska. Alaska usually doesn't see severe weather. I'm pretty sure last year, wasn't there like one warning in Alaska one day? Crazy. Further reminder, by the way, if you're just tuning in for the first time, again, make sure to subscribe down below. Do live streams, weather forecasts all the time. Also, make sure to like the stream. We've been enjoying it so far. We are actually only like 280 subscribers from 43,000 already. That's insane. Thank you, Ryan, for the 199. What's the hail size you think for Davenport? Nowhere in particular is guaranteed to see large to very large hail. The highest hailstone size, though, for like an area like Davenport, if you are to see hail, which again is not guaranteed and it will not be for certain, but if you were to see hail in Davenport, the maximum hailstone size will likely be somewhere in the range of like apple size. This is a sounding from a storm that may happen tomorrow. We'll go to this screen here. But you can see this weather sounding. I'm primarily just going to outline one thing here, which is your significant hail potential. It indicates upwards of baseball size. The lapse rates will be pretty... I wouldn't say they're super steep tomorrow, but they will be steep enough for some significant hailstone sizes. You can see up here, this is about 650-ish millibars. We got our freezing point there. Lapse rate is a bit steep, though, and that should be able to allow for some significant hail. But I'd say baseball size is a bit more reasonable for a maximum hailstone size, but I would not rule out up to apple-sized hail. But that's like a low chance. There's a bit more confidence for something closer to like 3 inches in diameter or so. Man, I know how to read those. I know how to read messages. Again, I'm not answering every question. That would be impossible. I have about 10 questions in chat every like 5 seconds. So I'm trying to answer as many as possible. So I thank you, Colby, for the $2 super chat. What time do you expect severe weather in Northeast Texas tomorrow? I'll go through the timing real quick. Northeast Texas is one of those areas that has a couple of different chances. One would be during the afternoon. A few storms may bubble up. That would be mainly large hail during the late afternoon. And then by the evening and overnight hours, storms would likely fire up in Northeast Texas near Paris, Texarkana. That is an area overnight where we would see a line of storms develop. This is where I think the squall line's a bit more of a potential here in terms of damaging winds and large hail. Yeah, this is where we have in our hands for us too. Oh, the graphs. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, the graphs, the soundings. What, you guys don't know what a sounding is? You don't know any of this stuff? Can't believe it. No, I'm telling you right now, these things look super complicated. They are really easy once you learn them, but these look like the most complicated thing ever. You'll see all these like red lines. You got this line, you got this line. It looks like a professional artist drew this, but no, these actually have very valuable weather information throughout the atmosphere. We're looking at 100 millibars here, 200 millibars there. We also got 300 millibars, 500, 700, 850. These are all of our heights on the left side. It's a bit of a log graph, basically, of a skew T. That's what it's called. And it's called a weather sounding for a bit more of a specific term. And we have our equilibrium level. This is where the temperature increases in the atmosphere, going to the stratosphere and all that sort of stuff. I really want to make a whole video on it because these soundings are so fascinating. To me, at least. They can be complicated, though. They do look crazy, though. There you are, Nemo for the 199, affected by a tornado in Champaign, Illinois, Friday. We good. I wouldn't say you're good. There's still a chance, but it's a low threat for Champaign. Champaign's kind of in an area where I would be a bit more concerned about damaging winds, and the threat for significant severe weather is probably unlikely. You might see severe storms, though, Wednesday morning. I'd be more concerned, again, though, for the damaging wind threat, not really a tornado threat. But you still have a chance for severe weather, without a doubt. Thank you, Austin, for the $9.99. I had to drive from Indianapolis to Milwaukee. I can leave anytime between now, 3 p.m. tomorrow, and 11 a.m. on Wednesday. What time would be the best time to leave? Indianapolis to Milwaukee. I wouldn't really put it against you that tomorrow, really right around 3 wouldn't be probably a bad time. You should be fine. Unless bearing something, again, drastically changing with how far north this warm front goes, the storm activity, if you're taking whatever this interstate is through Gary and back through Chicago or whatever going up to Milwaukee, you should be fine if you leave tomorrow afternoon. I don't have a whole lot of concern about that because, again, if the warm front does go further up to the north, we're talking about a different story. But if it stays where it's going to go right now, at least being forecasted to go, I wouldn't be concerned about traveling whatever interstate that is or roadway. How bad would the severe weather be in Detroit on Wednesday? It won't be bad, I would say, but just damaging winds is like the main concern there. Yeah, if you don't want to watch a 35-minute beginning of this live stream for all the specific details, today's forecast is great. It's it's not 8 minutes, it's 10 minutes long. It gives you all the details that you need to know. You have any sort of questions that you've not already gotten answered here. The video's like 10 minutes long. It's on my main channel. You can just click my name and find that. It's very descriptive, goes over everything, goes over the timing. And it's 10 minutes in comparison to like watching 35 minutes for 35 minutes of this live stream. Because I did not think the first 35 minutes of this live stream would be the entire forecast. I thought it'd be like 20 minutes. Can we go to sleep in Lebanon, Missouri? Yeah, you should be fine tonight. The threat's tomorrow, not tonight. Denton, Texas on Wednesday should be fine. That threat will be east, Mars. Northeast Texas is where that threat exists. Any threat for Mississippi tomorrow? No, not tomorrow. There is a threat going into like Wednesday, but not tomorrow. This is the current threat. I would pull it up on another graphic, but I don't have it. It hasn't updated, but this is a rare assurance, basically, from the Storm Prediction Center. This entire area was added into a slight risk on a day 3 outlook at 3 o'clock this afternoon. That never really happens. It's a very rare thing, so just kind of an FYI there. Let me find a graphic that I'll put it on there for now. Let me just double check, make sure I don't have any other things here. All right, cool. Good on that end. If you have not already liked the stream, by the way, make sure to like the stream. We're only 98 likes from 1,000. No, I don't think really liking the stream does a whole lot. It's still pretty cool to get 1,000 likes, I guess. Wednesday or Tuesday for Central Michigan. It would be more of a Wednesday threat. There's an isolated chance tomorrow, but the threat, I would say, is fairly low. I don't even think you're in the outlook. Yeah, there's a low chance going into Wednesday. That would be like during the late afternoon, possibly, but it's a low threat. Thank you, Aaron, for the $1.99. What can I be expecting in Vaughn, Indiana? That's a great question. I have absolutely no clue where that is either. Indianapolis. So that area on Tuesday has a low chance of severe weather tomorrow morning. That's a marginal threat, so this is tomorrow morning. And there might be a couple of storms tomorrow morning. It's a low-end threat right now. Then going into Wednesday or Tuesday afternoon and evening, that is when there won't really be anything for that specific area. But by eventually the overnight hours into Wednesday morning, that's when storms become more numerous and widespread. This is where we could see the potential for even a little bit of flooding and definitely a lot of rainfall, which again would lead to flooding. And in addition to that, we could very well see a little bit of hail and maybe some damaging winds. And this would eventually go into the overnight hours, Wednesday, or not overnight hours, going closer to late morning and early afternoon. That is when there might be some severe storms behind it. Damaging winds is probably the main concern, though, for that area. Isolated tornado threat. Will I be live on Wednesday? Let me look. This threat on Wednesday is morning, so probably not. I have classes until 3. If nobody's live, if there's nobody live and nobody's covering this, I might be able to go live for like a brief hour between like 11 to 1, but even then I probably wouldn't, just because it's so brief. I hate doing brief live streams for like an hour unless it's like absolutely needed, because you know, like tomorrow I'd probably able to go live for like an hour or two, but again, this office shirt is horrible and I just don't have that time tomorrow anyways. I have something planned after 3, so I probably will not go live on Wednesday with the current timing. If things change though, I might. So, but tomorrow is already a no-go for me. I might have an update live stream during like the late morning or early afternoon if something drastically changes, but expect something like that. I'll probably do something tomorrow late morning or early afternoon, just to give you a little update on what's happening. So make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you click the bell icon as well so you get notified whenever that live stream might happen. I doubt I'm doing a video tomorrow, since it's just such short notice. Thank you, Cass, for the $2 super chat. What will be, or how will Michigan, Berrien County handle? Let me figure out where that is. You'll pretty much be looking at mainly a damaging wind threat there. That will be mainly going into the late morning and early afternoon on Wednesday. You can see here, this is basically that area near Portage. Line of storms potentially during that time. Isolated tornado risk, but damaging winds is the main concern then. Tulsa should be fine. You could still see some severe weather, but I would not be overly concerned. Just make sure you have a way to receive alerts. Chance for severe weather is primarily going to be after sunset, if there is any storms there. That'd be that line of storms probably overnight. Thank you, by the way, for all the new subscribers. I appreciate it. Glad you're enjoying the content. We have gained about 7,000 subscribers in the past, like, 8 days. That is absolutely insane. Let me actually just double check here. Yeah, in the past 7 days, we've literally gained 7,000 subscribers. That is absolutely wild. In addition to that, the last 7 days, this channel has had over 650,000 views. How insane is that? Like, I'm not even kidding. Like, I don't usually talk about these statistics because I usually don't really care. But I'm telling you, like, I've never, I don't even know. That's just crazy. Wild, to say the least. I do really greatly appreciate everybody's support, by the way. Like, I don't say it enough, but I really do. It goes a long way. It really does. I'm glad you all enjoy the weather forecast and all that sort of stuff, and glad you trust me to provide you the latest weather information. Especially with all the crazy storms we've had recently. And really, the last week, it's been Friday was the big tornado outbreak, and now tomorrow is going to be potentially another one. I still think tomorrow isn't going to be as bad as what people think it'll be, because it's not going to be as widespread. That's the big thing. This event tomorrow will not be a widespread severe weather event. We're talking about more of a regional outbreak, which would, again, probably be in this region here. Oop, that is not the right thing. Let me undo this. 1 second. Go. But it'd probably be a more regional outbreak over here. That is where I think the higher tornado risk is. That is where we could see a tornado develop very quickly with any supercells that develop. In addition to that, we could see a damaging wind and hail threat really start to transpire with this region. So that is a more concerning region, as well as going into Arkansas and as well as back into areas like southern Missouri. That region as well has a concern for some evening and overnight threats for severe weather. So these two areas are still very concerning. It's, again, not nearly as widespread, though. We're not looking at a massive area with storms the entire day or something like that. Because last time we had a ton of storms that fired off around 2, 3 o'clock. We had a bunch of tornado warnings. We had tornadoes ongoing everywhere pretty much in those areas. This event would probably be a bit less than that because these are not going to be widespread supercells absolutely everywhere. So just keep that in mind. They're not the same. Suburbs of Chicago, the main threat right now would be damaging winds, but isolated tornado is still not out of the question. And maybe some isolated hail. For anybody that's wondering about Chicago, by the way, that's basically what we're looking at right now. When weather happens when weather happens, my kid's high school aged ask is Max Velocity live. That's awesome. That's cool. Yeah, I wish I could go live for every severe weather event, but as you guys already know, I'm in college right now, and for those that are wondering, what am I studying? I'm studying meteorology, but yeah, balancing full-time college and doing this is really difficult, and I'm glad I'm able to go live as much as I am and make daily videos. I'm telling you, videos take about an hour or two every day to make. Live streams also obviously take up a good couple hours usually when I do them, so there's a lot to balance. That is without a doubt. Just curious, the latest HR model run just came out. Seeing if there's anything different here. It doesn't go out far enough, that's the problem. I don't know if they're going to have really any changes here at all. If the model's picking up on anything different, we'll see. This one has 2 more hour runs on it, so we'll see if it gets to 3 o'clock and see if there's anything there. Hey, no problem, Breyer. Appreciate you tuning in. Or Breyer. I think it's Breyer. Thanks, Ohio. Appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, I still get the guilt. Like, you know, I always get the guilt when I'm not live for significant severe weather. I like really get like guilt from it. But you know, it's like it's not controllable for the most part. Like, I can't control a lot of the things that I have ongoing, anyways. Meteorology is not one class. There are multiple. I'm taking 5 classes, I think, this semester. 1, 2. Yeah, I'm taking 5. Most semesters are about 5. Which over 4 years, that is 5, 10, 15, 20, about 40-ish. Maybe a little bit less. It's probably about 30, like 6 or something. Total classes. Which, to be honest with you, like right now what I'm taking is thermodynamic weather. That's a lot to do with instability. A lot to do with like, oh man, there's a lot of, it's basically a lot of math. It's like the math part of weather. So what I'm basically learning right now in that is a lot of like math related stuff. And then there's also a coding weather thing where we are making we're literally coding weather maps, which is kind of cool. So we're doing that, but nothing like, you know, broadcast related. I had a broadcast class last semester, which was really good, honestly, because you might not realize I say it still a lot, but like, as you can see, is like a forbidden word in weather in any broadcast sense. People, or most meteorologists, try to avoid the phrase "as you can see" or "take a look at." You want to use actual transition words and stuff, and this is just a nice piece of advice for anybody that has any interest in doing broadcast weather. As you can see and take a look at, avoid those phrases. Those things should be banned out of your mind if you're talking about weather. I used to say those a lot more than I ever thought. Like, literally, in one single video, back before I took that class, I was probably saying a good 10 to 15 times. Now, in any given video, I might say it once or twice. That's like the most. Even if that, I don't even think I really do it anymore. So, you learn something new every day. But yeah, that was one of the big things I learned from that class. But yeah, again, if you're interested in meteorology or you have your own channel or whatever, just some advice. I'm paying a lot of money for that advice as well. All right, here's the 18Z model run on the HR model. Not showing anything at 3 o'clock. Yeah, again, tomorrow's going to be interesting. It's just a matter of where this low pressure system positions itself. I am curious to see, though, what the Storm Prediction Center does say at the 2 a.m. update tonight. I really am curious. It's a few hours away, but I'm really curious to see what they actually say. I still have a lot of... my confidence is just very low with the overall threat of all these storms developing and whatnot. And the storms right now aren't forecasted to develop until 4, but... Adam right now, 2. Kansas City's not really in much of any threat tomorrow. I don't even think you are in the threat. Oh, maybe you are. You're in like a low threat though. Damaging winds is really the only concern there. That would be with that linear squall line that might develop during the overnight hours, but I still have a lot less confidence in that happening. But it would be more of a damaging wind threat. You'll probably see something, but it wouldn't be too significant. Fort Wayne's threat will be Wednesday. Isolated damaging winds is the main concern. Again, this is your timing right now. Main threat for storms would be during the afternoon on Tuesday, early afternoon. But again, timing may change a little bit, so I'm not going to get into specific details with timing quite yet. I'm kind of giving you like a time frame, maybe the early afternoon, but it could vary a little bit. So let's keep that in mind. Clinton, I don't think so. The timing right now does kind of interfere with classes. So I probably won't be able to. I say probably, but again, if things change a little bit, we'll see. We'll see what happens tomorrow. We'll get through tomorrow and see what happens. NATOcast just came out with their most recent tornado outlook for tomorrow. For those that might be curious, NATOcast is not affiliated with the Storm Prediction Center. For those that are curious, they are just their own entity. But this is essentially, they have the same scaling system. A little bit different, actually. So this is your 2% area, is this green shade. 2% chance within a 25-mile radius. This, I think, is 3%. Or is that 1%? I can't remember. Yeah, all right, I got that right. It's 2%, 3%. 5% is going to be that brown shaded area. And again, I actually agree a bit more with NATOcast. Shockingly enough, I actually agree with this more in comparison to the big 15% probability. But I wouldn't rule out, it being around that still. And this is your 10% significant area. That's actually an area that I'm a bit concerned about for really the late afternoon and evening hours. So again, that's the latest NATOcast outlook. So you got your little 10% significant area. Again, they use computer models. It looks really funky. It doesn't look, smooth and stuff like that. But again, it's not a bad little metric to look at. And in comparison to the Storm Prediction Center, by the way, this is their current tornado outlook. So it's much different, obviously. But all the ingredients are there. Just the problem is the timing of this low pressure system is the biggest problem. I've mentioned this a ton. The timing of this low pressure system is about 12-ish hours different from what Friday was, because the low pressure system tomorrow, I'll go back to this graphic here. The low pressure system that's going to occur tomorrow in comparison to Friday at 12 o'clock, the low pressure system was here. This is 12 p.m. on, I'm using horrible colors here, but this is Friday. The low pressure system was here. This was at 12 p.m. on Friday. That is where we saw that huge severe weather outbreak, tornado outbreak and all that. This is at the same exact time tomorrow, 12 o'clock. This is 12 p.m. And notice once this low pressure system moves up to the north and east, it doesn't even get close to that area until like 8, 9 o'clock. 8 to 9 o'clock is when that low pressure system actually gets into Iowa and Minnesota. They are just so different here. So there's a big difference there. So just kind of throwing that out there. Throwing that out there, excuse me. How's it going, Andy? Hope everything's going well. NATOcast works closely? Really? They do? That's actually surprising. NATOcast apparently works closely with the Storm Prediction Center now. I did not know that. I didn't really ever use NATOcast until the last few months. I've kind of looked at it more and more, so I don't really pay attention, though, I guess, to the news. Yeah, again, the low pressure systems, the timing is just so off right now in terms of Friday to now. They're not the same identical events. I've said that a bunch. They're not the same events, so just keep that in mind. The timing's different. Obviously, the magnitude of the severe weather does vary now with that. The warm front and how far north that goes and all that sort of stuff, it's just delayed, basically. And with that delay, it kind of creates a bit more uncertainty of how many storms will actually develop during the afternoon across the Midwest. So that's what we're looking at there. Let's go back over to, we'll go back over to this graphic for now. Thank you, Danielle, for the $5 super chat. What are the risks for Iron County, Missouri? I, again, do not know where that is. Let me figure out where that is, though. Have a great night, by the way, Mystic. Appreciate you tuning in. Stay safe tomorrow. Can't remember if you're on the risk, but I'm pretty sure you are. Iron County, your concern more than anything will be damaging winds. Again, that area of Missouri, anywhere really in southern Missouri, I'll kind of go back here to Missouri here, but more concerningly would be the damaging wind potential, because that would be a bit more numerous across Missouri. So this is going through the afternoon and evening. There might be a few storms. Again, if they organize and if they're able to become a bit more discreet, we could see an increased tornado threat. But right now, it's not really, the signs aren't really pointing towards that. But once we get closer to the overnight hours, that is when a linear line of storms will develop. And if it is able to stay alive through Iron County, you could see some damaging winds. But keep in mind, you still have a severe weather threat even throughout really anywhere starting from as early as like 6, 7 o'clock all the way through the overnight hours. There is still a chance that this little band of storms could produce maybe a isolated tornado threat if it's able to develop. And again, if it becomes organized, that is basically the bigger concern. But if that doesn't end up becoming organized, you'd be watching for more of that linear line of storms going into the overnight hours, which, again, the squall line potential out of this is more significant, I would say, down to the south in the southern plains in comparison to the Mississippi Valley and as well as the Midwest. How's Illinois, northern Illinois? Yeah, so northern Illinois is kind of one of those areas where the warm front will basically be, and you might notice here on the HRR model, going up here to the north, this is where we're going to be watching for some of those discrete cells. The thing is, will they go far enough to the north? Like, how far north will they basically go? The warm front is basically cut off right here. At least that's what's being forecasted around 6 o'clock on Tuesday. So if those discrete cells form, and if they move up to the north here through Rockford, they'll probably weaken right around the Wisconsin and Illinois border. But if that warm front is further to the north by tomorrow afternoon, then those storms could actually march into southern Wisconsin before probably eventually weakening out as they actually enter into central Wisconsin. So that's the current timing right now for that and the potential. Yeah, it's entirely possible that that cold front acts a bit more like a dry line. That's, yeah, Jaden, I don't disagree with that at all. It's definitely possible. That line of storms, I still think, is being a little bit underestimated on the computer models. You probably already noticed it looks like it weakens out quite quickly. I think it'll be a bit stronger than this, and it'll probably last a bit longer, and it'll probably be a bit more organized. Obviously, the computer models, for the most part, have not been picking up on that, but I wouldn't rule that out. But again, I think the HR model has been actually a bit more conservative in that terms of an approach. The discrete supercells, I think it's been okay with. So far, I still think this will probably be our action. We'll probably see a few supercells that form, maybe one more than this here across this region, and then probably a couple back over in Iowa, going closer to around near sunset or so when that cap kind of goes away. When that cold front starts pushing off to the east, it'll become a bit more of an initiator. So that's what we're looking at in that department. Alrighty, well, we've been live for 2 hours. I've gone over pretty much everything that you need to know. Friendly reminder, if you've not already, watch today's forecast. It has a lot more details for you. Again, tomorrow will be probably a pretty active day. I'll try to do a quick live stream tomorrow, late morning or early afternoon, if needed. If there's anything really to talk about, I'll obviously do that, if there's like any big updates. But otherwise, make sure to subscribe below if you've not already and click the bell icon so you get notified for the latest forecasts and live streams. Make sure to like the live stream if you enjoyed the live stream. I appreciate everybody tuning in. It has been a great 2 hours with you. Again, stay safe tomorrow. If I don't see you tomorrow, stay safe. And also have multiple ways to receive alerts. And make sure you have your tornado action plan in place tonight and not tomorrow. Make sure you have it in place now so you can actually utilize it tomorrow instead of panicking last second. Just make sure you have that plan in place. No reason to panic tomorrow. Just make sure that you are prepared for the severe weather ahead. Again, if you want to check out the forecast today for more details, if you want more specific details on what you can expect tomorrow, make sure to check out today's forecast. It came out a couple hours ago. The video link is in the chat there for you. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Thank you all for the generosity as well with the super chats. Any new members, I really do appreciate you. Have a great, safe rest of your night, and we will see you guys all again soon.